Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo Sam Monson live on YouTube. That's right, we're live this time. You at your house, me from my parents' basement. It's all brought to you by FanDuel and not coming at you from any named studio. Sam, how you doing, man?
Doing well. How about you, Steve?
Doing well. Back in Massachusetts. A little break. We've had some pre-recorded shows out there, but this one is officially live and another fun one, breaking down the 2024 first round of the NFL draft.
How's the old country?
It's good. It was very hot here for a few days. So Just rotating between the pool and the air conditioner, in and out. Wife's 8 months pregnant now, so I'm just like following the kids around, whatever games they're trying to play in the old neighborhood here. But it's been good. They're living my 8-year-old dream, right? Like I used to wake up, go to the cul-de-sac, play some baseball, jump in the pool. Like they're living it right now for a couple of weeks, and then we go to Cape Cod for a little bit. So
the Cape.
We'll be on the Cape next week. So yeah, doing well. And today, these are some of my favorite shows, Sam. Going back, doing the player evaluation piece, but in hindsight, and as we've done on some of these other shows, and we have another one coming out on the 2023 NFL draft, as you highlighted, that's the proper way of doing it, 3 full years of evidence. But we like to go back and say, hey, what were we thinking at the time of the draft? What has happened during, since then, in this case, over the last 2 years, and then what's going to happen going forward? How do we project these players going forward? Sound good?
3 years is nobody can complain about 3 years. You got all the information you want. 2 years, it's 66% valid. So we'll see.
So let's get into it. 2024 NFL draft. It was a wild draft, Sam. There were a lot of milestones here. We thought this past year, 2025, was a little weak relative to storylines. Last year was Shedeur Sanders in 25, but in 24, 6 quarterbacks in the top 12. No defensive players until pick 14. So there were high value players. There were the expected top 3 quarterbacks: Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, and Drake Maye. Still didn't really know the order, but we started to get that sorted as we got closer to the draft. So Caleb Williams goes number 1 overall to the Chicago Bears in the 2024 NFL draft. No surprise there, but there'll be some surprises in a little bit. Thoughts on Caleb Williams, how we got here, and what he's been so far?
Yeah, I mean, he was a relatively pillar to post number 1 overall prospect. From the year before, we'd expected Caleb Williams to be the guy. Drake Maye and Jayden Daniels, the kind of closer we got to the draft, sort of got some hype in various places. Drake Maye started, it was weird. Drake Maye started off as sort of 1A with Caleb Williams, right? There were people pushing him. And then all of his pre-draft process seemed to be nitpicking and negative. And actually, is he really that good? And then right at the end, it was like, no, actually, Drake Maye does belong at the top. And then Jayden Daniels sort of went the other way, where his was the late surge, and he became the guy that was being pushed into that top echelon with Caleb Williams, with Drake Maye as well. But ultimately, I don't think anyone was ever seriously contesting that number 1 overall spot from Caleb Williams.
Yeah, that's what I love, going back in time to what we thought, because it's like, oh well, Caleb Williams, of course he went number 1. I remember I would put polls out there all fall, Caleb Williams or Drake Maye. And they weren't that close. Like most people selected Caleb Williams, but those were the 2 players. It was Drake Maye going into that season. And he didn't even have a bad year. And we'll talk about Maye in a couple minutes here. He didn't really have a bad year necessarily, but Jayden Daniels had an incredible year, wins the Heisman, and an LSU team that had no defense. It had 2 great receivers, but it did feel like Jayden Daniels was the best player on the field every single week. Even with Malik Nabers, even with Bryon Thomas Jr. So as we got closer to the draft, people were like, wait, Jayden Daniels, not only is he an outstanding runner, you saw his scrambling ability at LSU, but he could throw it, patient in the pocket, makes all the throws, that type of deal. And he surpassed Drake Maye, goes number 2, and Maye went number 3. But as far as Caleb Williams goes, he was, as you said, kind of like wire to wire. He starts at Oklahoma. he's making special throws, arm talent wise and everything. And it's the usual thing, right? Like you see these flashes. In his case, I believe is a redshirt freshman, maybe as a true freshman, but you see them early in his career. Then he transfers to USC, and it's just like, well, he's going to be the guy, just like Trevor Lawrence was the guy wire to wire, just like Jameis Winston was the guy wire to wire. Andrew Luck was the guy wire to wire, but in like a special echelon of prospect. But we were talking about Caleb Williams the same way as Trevor Lawrence, Andrew Luck, best prospect since. Did we overrate it? Does that happen too often? But that's where he was. And to this point, I think last year he took a big step in year 2 with Ben Johnson. I thought year 1 was characterized by massive inconsistencies, right? Like we would always be looking for patterns. We talk about how we're always looking for patterns, right? Two bad games. They need to have 2 good games. Is this the corner that Caleb's turned? No, he's back down again. But the offense wasn't doing him any favors. But I thought year 2 was a much better performance overall from Caleb Williams.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of a needed one as well, because like his final year in college, it was like the magic ran out, for his the previous seasons of his college career. He was looking like Patrick Mahomes, like NFL Mahomes, right? It's like this guy's got some magic touch. Everything he does is crazy. Like he doesn't make mistakes. He's able to pull off all the ridiculous plays that just shouldn't be possible, that they teach you not to do. And it was almost perfect. And he was definitely that wire to wire number 1 prospect. And then his final year, it was like the magic had run out. And every time he, reverse course, threw the ball back across his body into trouble, suddenly those were getting picked off. And he had a bunch of turnovers, a bunch of turnover-worthy plays. And like, okay, maybe he's not the Superman prospect that he looked like. Maybe he's not Patrick Mahomes 2.0, but he was still, the number 1 player in the draft, the guy that was going to go number 1 overall. And then year 1 in the NFL, you saw those negatives sort of still show up in a big way. The sack rate was pretty catastrophic. He made some mistakes. And you're like, okay, this might look more like people expected Mahomes to look like when we didn't know whether this was going to work, right? Whether this Texas Tech magician was going to be able to play within the confines of an NFL offense. And then Mahomes just shows up and looks amazing. It looks sort of more like, I think, expectations for Mahomes rather than the reality. But then year 2, like you said, we saw this huge step forward in particular the escapability stuff, the not taking the sort of hidden negative plays, the sacks, those types of things. He went from one of the worst in the NFL at pressure to sack rate to one of the best. He was incredibly elusive back there and was making some big plays. And now really the only thing left is that little bit of efficiency on just some more routine passes, right? That the accuracy, the overall just down to down throw efficiency is not where it needs to be yet for him to be one of the very best quarterbacks in the NFL. But he's taken huge steps forward and has shown that late in the game, clutch magic gene that, those quarterbacks have, that he had in his college career, that obviously Mahomes has had in the NFL. There's something to that late game magic. It's not going to be it doesn't on its own make you the best quarterback in the NFL, but the best quarterback in the NFL probably needs to have that. And he does.
Yeah. If anybody listened to the Nate Tice episode last week that we did, we got some great feedback on that. And if you haven't checked it out, I encourage you to go listen to it. He mentioned Mahomes in late game situations and how he just has all the tools in his bag. And I think that's how I would describe Caleb Williams in those late game situations. 6 fourth quarter comebacks last year, tied for the league lead during the regular season, including some playoff magic in there as well from Caleb Williams. So I keep coming back to last year at this time. I was saying I thought it might take a half season for him and Ben Johnson to get on the same page and figure out that balance. I don't know if that's the best description of what happened necessarily, but I think what we saw was Ben Johnson still doing a great job of scheming it up. Caleb Williams leaving a little bit of meat on the bone, but then you see at the end of games, Caleb Williams' ability to take over, to use his arm and use his legs, big time throws down the field. I still think he's one of the best in the league throwing on the run, for whatever that's worth. It's a couple throws a game, but his ability to throw with to run at a high speed and still throw the ball with incredible velocity and accuracy is outstanding. And I'm going to throw Caleb Williams in this bucket of quarterbacks where once they got into the NFL, their athleticism was far more impressive either than I expected or than what we saw in college, right? This is Josh Allen, Jackson Dart, Caleb Williams. I mean, even Mahomes, you could say that. We were expecting what Lamar's done. We were expecting maybe what Jayden Daniels has done because they ran for so many yards in college. But Caleb Williams' speed last year was unbelievable. His speed as a scrambler, getting to the edge, picking up first downs, and it's just another added weapon. Tyler Shuck was doing some of this last year. I mean, I have to stop underestimating. Even Shedeur looked a little bit more athletic, I think, last year than we had anticipated. So I got to stop underestimating the college quarterbacks athletically. But Caleb Williams' legs were a legitimate weapon, where I think previously I would describe him more like Aaron Rodgers, where it's like, hey, he'll run when he needs to. Caleb Williams' speed, like hitting over 20 miles an hour multiple times, winning to the edge at times when it looked like he should be down at the 5 and he gets it into the end zone. That was really impressive to me. So just further confirms, I think Caleb Williams has all the tools. And what I'm looking for this year is hit the open dig route, right? Hit the open check down, hit the open throws 4 to 5% more, right? Even the raw stats tell a pretty good story, Sam. 58% completion percent. I hate using that as a stat, but when you're at 58, there's usually kernels of truth in there between accuracy and decision-making. 58's extremely low for today's NFL, but you mentioned the sack rate. It came down from over 10% of his dropbacks getting sacked, which is insane, down to 4. You know, that improvement, losing those negative plays, now just hit some more of the layups to go with all the tools, the big-time throws, the speed, the scrambling ability. That's where I still think Caleb Williams could be in the MVP race in any given season if he could put it all together.
Yeah, it's not just the speed. It's like every aspect. Like he was faster, stronger, and more dynamic and elusive than I expected him to be. You're right. Aaron Rodgers was a pretty good comp coming out. And actually, he's more like Steve Young athletically.
Yeah, for like how he would use his legs is the way I was saying that. Yep.
But he's actually more Steve Young than he is Aaron Rodgers in terms of being like a legitimate high-end athletic threat. The other thing is, it's not just that he's good at throwing on the run. He's good at throwing on the run, and he's got the ridiculous arm on the move that means all areas of the field are still open when he's running, right? There are some quarterbacks where they're running, and you're like, okay, we immediately dramatically shrink down the amount of field that's actually available to this guy, right? He can still throw on the run, but only to this small quadrant of the field. Caleb Williams is on the run, and the whole field is still a target. Like, you need to cover everything still, because he's got the ability to make utterly ridiculous throws on the run that are genuinely rare, that you know, very few quarterbacks in the NFL can make. I think you're right. Look, just using completion rate is a bad way of evaluating quarterbacks, but that's not to say that completion rate doesn't sometimes tell an accurate story about a quarterback. And for the moment, completion rate is telling an accurate story on Caleb Williams, which is just overall his accuracy, his efficiency is not where it needs to be yet, but everything else is. Like he's like an MVP quarterback in waiting if he can just improve some basic down-to-down efficiency, which theoretically should be the easiest thing to improve. Like, it's not easy to be Steve Young athletically. It's not easy to be Patrick Mahomes on the run. It's not easy to be Tom Brady clutch late in the fourth quarter. All of those things he's already got. Now all you got to do is be like, you know, insert random 1990s accurate quarterback. Like, do that bit.
That's the key. For fear of going off the rails here with the very first pick, I will keep it tight. The baseball community, Sam, up in arms. The old heads, the old former players, they hate the fact that pitchers only care about velocity, and they were like they were like calling out this 15-year-old. Oh, he's throwing 92, great, but he posted this video of him never throwing a strike, and they're like, good luck, kid, learn some control and command, right? You'll never make it. But the point was, like, throwing 92 at 15 is difficult. That's the difficult part, right? Not that throwing strikes is easy, but like, if Caleb Williams had no arm and no athleticism and he was pinpoint and made all the right decisions, then he's Kellen Moore, right? It's like, then you don't even get a shot. He has the difficult part, the tools, the arm talent, and the speed. And now he just has to improve a little bit on the easy stuff. And I know we've said this at other times throughout the years on certain quarterbacks, and maybe they never get there. But that's how I would describe this for everybody that's like, well, he doesn't, quarterback's about hitting the open man. It is. But Caleb Williams is also athletic enough to tighten up his mechanics, to tighten up his footwork, to make those adjustments. And I think that's what the Bears are banking on. That's what we saw from a super athletic Josh Allen in year 3, where his footwork improved, his accuracy improved, and now he's a superstar. So I think there's still more in the tank for Caleb Williams, for fear of going down this road of, because he's Caleb Williams as a prospect, because he was Trevor Lawrence as a prospect, because he was Andrew Luck as a prospect, we always assumed more. But I think in this case, it's fair because we've seen him do the very difficult stuff, late game comebacks, big time throws, scrambling ability. We've seen him do that stuff at a high level. All right. Pick number 2 was Jayden Daniels going to the Washington Commanders in the 2024 NFL draft. I will say this was kind of locked in fairly early in the process, I would say. Like, there wasn't a lot of surprise here. I was a Drake Maye fan coming out, and I was still wondering a little bit if Washington might go that way, but Jayden Daniels surpassed Drake Maye during the draft process and went number 2 overall. And in year 1, it looked like, wow, the Commanders have the best quarterback in this draft. And let me just toss it to you with this. 3 years into this, as we head into year 3, you could make a case that Jayden Daniels is the best quarterback in this class. You could make a case that Drake Maye is the best quarterback in this class. You could make a case that you still believe that Caleb Williams will be the best quarterback in this class. And in a few picks, Broncos fans will make the case that Bo Nix has the best winning percentage of any quarterback. So I'll take Bo over everybody. There are cases for 3.5 quarterbacks to be the top quarterback coming out of this class so far, heading into year 3.
Yeah, the Daniels versus Maye thing was kind of interesting because, you know, we've said Drake Maye was the 1A for the majority of the process. Didn't have a great final year. Wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. Meanwhile, Jayden Daniels did have a great year, and it's like, so they're sort of moving in opposite directions. A lot of the criticism on Drake Maye, a lot of the cons column from his analysis was a little bit like what we've been talking about of NFL Caleb Williams. It's like, why are you just missing so many routine, layups? Why are you not hitting this? And it's like, yeah, you didn't have a ton of help around you, but that shouldn't be the reason you're just missing an open throw, right? Like the fact that the receiver you're throwing to is a future UPS driver. If he's open, he's open. Like the fact that you didn't get it within 5 yards of him is not the fact. That's not his fault for being a future UPS driver. Like he was there, it's just a basic target miss. So that was the kind of question with Drake Maye is, yes, the situation, the supporting cast around him hasn't been great, but so many of the misses, the negatives seem to be on him, not on the supporting cast. Meanwhile, Daniels was spectacular. And really the only negative from him was, the pressure to sack rate is high. And the nerds tell you that's a really sticky statistic going from college to the NFL. And then also the fact that he treats himself like a crash test dummy and has no self-preservation instincts whatsoever. And you're like, dude, for somebody who's pretty, lightweight, small, not built like Josh Allen, that's just scary. And year 1, it wasn't a problem, but year 2 already, we've seen him, come away with injuries. And now you're like that, it's got to at least scare you going forward. The fact that the guy we had questions about whether his durability would hold up because of the way he plays the game has already run into some injury problems.
And he did miss some time in year 1, not as much as year 2, but he did miss a game or two, right? When Marcus Mariota had to come in there. So it has been a concern. I mean, the biggest concern for Daniels, I think, has to be the durability. And then the question of, is this a internal fine system? I'm going to use completion percentage again to make a point just because it's at extreme ends. In year 1, the way I would characterize Jayden Daniels as a rookie, 69% completion percentage. And I think the story behind using completion percentage is not like this is a direct proxy for accuracy, but I think it's also a proxy for depth of target and for decision-making. And, longtime listeners will have heard me say this before. What I was most impressed about with Jayden Daniels, and it felt like this new age of quarterbacking, if something wasn't there, he didn't force the throw. So he completed 69% of his passes because, yes, he was accurate and made good decisions. But if something wasn't there, he wasn't going to throw a 50-50 ball, which is really a 30-70 ball. He wasn't going to take a low percentage shot. He could scramble and pick up 5. I thought his efficiency was so incredible because he just did not throw incompletions and then Week 3 was his big coming out party. I know the Bengals defense was not good, but it was in Cincinnati, Monday Night Football. Washington's coming off having the number 2 pick. So remember this, right? They had the number 2 pick. They weren't supposed to be good. And Jayden Daniels is out there, 21 of 23. Incredible game. The Bengals have 0 pass rush. I mean, it was on easy mode for a lot of the game, but then they heated him up. Late game, all-out blitz. He's about to get hit on the chin and throws an absolute dot right in the end zone on a fade for a touchdown that sealed the deal. That was the coming out party for me for Jayden Daniels. Bengals defense or not, it was so impressive what he did. And so there was a lot to like about what he did in year 1. The completion percentage, which I think was a proxy of good decision-making and saying, hey, if I don't have a high percentage throw, I'm going to scramble for 5 or 6, keep us on schedule. They started to use his legs later in the season. And remember, that was the year that they were also extremely high in 4th down conversion rate, which was because of Jayden Daniels, right? It's like we could run QB sweep, we can roll him out, we can use his legs, and they leaned into it at the right time. So I thought it was a really good mix playing style-wise with Jayden Daniels. He could win from the pocket. I thought he immediately became one of the best scrambling quarterbacks, maybe the best scrambling quarterback in the NFL. I think it's Jayden Daniels, it's Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. And remember, when I say scrambling, I'm talking about on pass plays. I think Lamar is the best designed runner in the NFL. I think Allen is up there as a designed runner. Mahomes is up there as a scrambler. Jayden Daniels, I think his scrambling decisions in execution were outstanding, but it still comes down to, okay, like a lot of quarterbacks who use their legs, what's the balance now? Can you afford to have 10 carries a game if you're Jayden Daniels with his frame? In the way you take hits, right? Some other quarterbacks are good at avoiding hits. Jayden has never been. And that was his rookie season. I thought his rookie season, we were putting up there like, hey, this is the best since last year when we saw Stroud, and the best since Russell Wilson, 2012. Like, it was up there. But he also regressed a little bit as a player, but we didn't get to see much of him last year. And so fascinated to see what happens in year 3. But like I said earlier, Jayden Daniels has a case to say, hey, I've been the best quarterback in this class so far and will be going forward, just like Drake Maye and some others maybe have a similar case.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Washington should still be extremely optimistic for the future with Jayden Daniels. I think he can still be a spectacular quarterback. He may need to modify the way he plays the game, given that recklessness. And also, anytime a quarterback comes into the league who is sort of a unique player, a spectacular athlete, there's going to be an adjustment period 2-3 years in when the NFL figures you out, right? To a degree. You always have to get past that initial evolution of the league has tape on you now. They understand your strengths. They understand why you became a cheat code on 4th down. There's now a defensive game plan in place, and you now need to take the next step forward and evolve beyond that, right? And everybody goes through that. Mahomes, Josh Allen, blah, blah, blah. And part of what makes quarterbacks great is that ability to evolve their game and, become version 2.0 that doesn't have the easy answer on defense. And so we haven't gotten through that yet with Jayden Daniels. It's going to be coming up, and that's just something he's going to have to deal with as well. They all are, but him in particular, because of him being such a unique athlete as part of that success.
One of the storylines too to keep an eye on in this year's NFL. We've talked a lot about Jalen Hurts, new coordinator, being Sean Mannion, and they're trying to, in Philly, put Jalen Hurts into a system that is completely different from his playing style. New system in Washington, David Blau taking over. The guy was just playing in the NFL a couple of years ago. It's supposed to be a Detroit Ben Johnson derivative. It's supposed to be far more under center, right? This is the new thing in the NFL. You got to go under center. And you can't even run an offense if you can't take a snap under center here in 2026. So it's not going to be as shotgun heavy. Cliff Kingsbury, it's another just a strange 2-year run for Cliff Kingsbury where he always seems to do well for a year and then year 2's not as good. It's like people that remember way back, Dom Capers used to do that on the defensive side of the ball. He'd have a great year 1 as a DC, and then the league would be like, oh yeah, we've seen these zone blitzes before. Kingsbury seems to have that, things taper off. So that's going to be an interesting storyline here. The first-time play caller and David Blau. and a new system for Jayden Daniels. And then again, figuring out that balance. Okay, if you're under center, you lose QB run ability, right? You lose that ability to threaten the defense with your legs and win the box count and win the numbers game. So they got to figure out what that balance is. But Daniels has all the tools to continue to develop and be a star. And he was such a star in year one. I think he was in that QB. Like, is he going to be the next QB5 after the big four? Like he was in that mix, right?
And you never know with coaches, but Blau is being talked about as like one of these next superstar coaches, right? Like the people are incredibly high on David Blau. So that could be a real boost for Daniels and the offense overall.
All right, pick number 3, New England Patriots, Drake Maye. We learned a little bit before the draft and after the draft, the New York Giants were trying to trade up for Maye. The Minnesota Vikings were trying to trade up for Drake Maye. The Patriots said, no way, we're staying put. Remember, this was Bill Belichick had just been fired. He led them to a 4-win season. Gerard Mayo was taken over, and the Patriots, Elliott Wolf took over as the official general manager, and the Patriots stood pat and said, no, we're taking Drake Maye. As I said earlier on the show, Maye was thought to be 1 or 2, right? He was going to be QB2 behind Caleb Williams the entire season until Jayden Daniels took over. And I think the Patriots really luck out here because every other season on either side of this, there's been 1 quarterback, 2 quarterbacks going in the top 10. And in the season where we saw 6 in the top 12, I mean, I think Drake Maye is a number 1 overall prospect in any other season in the last, 5 years? Like, go back to the Bryce Young year. He might be picked over Bryce Young. He's probably picked over Cam Ward. I think he's picked over Fernando Mendoza, and the Patriots get Drake Maye at number 3 overall. Year 1, you'd probably say he has a bottom 3 offensive line, a bottom 3 group of playmakers. The stats backed it up, but he was kind of impressive in that situation. And then in year 2, he's number 2 in the MVP race and leads the Patriots to a Super Bowl where they lost to the Seattle Seahawks.
Oh, he was really impressive as a rookie in that situation. Like, that situation between the offensive line and the receivers was so bad. I didn't think they should put him out there at all because I thought it was potentially damaging. I thought he would either get hurt, or more likely and more problematic potentially is that in such a terrible situation, he would develop bad habits. He would, skew into a bad way of playing that just doesn't help, right? Those are not useful reps. If anything, they're making you worse. They're prolonging your development. Instead, immediately he looked good. He elevated the group. He was making some crazy plays. And okay, there was some inefficiency. There was but the situation was terrible, right? But overall, to survive that was impressive. To actually look good and make plays and, elevate the group, given how bad it was incredibly impressive. And then year 2, they've made the offensive line better. They've made the receiving core better. They're still not great, but they're a lot better than they were. And he goes out there and has, an MVP caliber season. Didn't quite win it, but was right up there and, had the argument and looked, amazing. And all of that inefficiency that we talked about as the sort of final year in college or year 1, sort of forget about it because of the situation. But like, the inefficiency had disappeared. He was just out there balling, making plays at an incredibly high level, was super efficient, looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now.
Yeah, Maye as a prospect too, Sam, here's what I was surprised about. Personally, I never soured on Maye as a prospect. I got what was off. You mentioned it earlier, like he would miss the gimmies, and they were a little bit different from Caleb Williams. It was like, dude, your footwork on a simple swing or flat route or like a little 5-yard hitch, you're overthrowing these dudes. Now, it wasn't to the point where you would say, oh, he's going to complete 58% of his passes like Caleb Williams did last year. It's like, man, like, why are you missing the gimmies? But I thought Maye was so impressive I thought he was so impressive throwing the ball over the middle and what he was able to do, seeing it, being pinpoint over the middle. He could make big time throws. He's another guy maybe that runs better than we had anticipated as far as the volume of runs that you have at the NFL level. Remember year 1, he was averaging like 9 yards per carry as a scrambler. That helped a little bit because they never won, so he didn't have QB Niels tearing down his yards per attempt, but his scrambling ability has been really good. So I always thought I would pick him number 1 I'm just going off the top of my head back to the Trevor Lawrence draft in 2021. Every draft except this one that he was in, I think he goes number 1 overall. 2022, 23, 25, and 26. And so last year was much better. They gave him more of a supporting cast. They shored up the offensive line a lot better. He has Josh McDaniels come in, and I thought he improved a ton. Now, where the issues came up, so he improved a ton. I think the gimmies are getting better, right? He's not missing the easy stuff. I think he's still very good throwing the ball to the middle of the field, and I think his downfield, the go ball that Drake Maye has thrown, the number of big throws that he made last season in crunch time, in big games. I know people cite the schedule, but we've already unpacked that. The pass defense schedule was not on the easy side. The overall schedule was absolutely on the easy side, right? The defense had it easy. The team had it easy as far as who they played. They didn't play a lot of winning teams. He played some decent defenses, though. The criticism of Maye would come up, hey, once it came playoff time, he was absolutely a passenger on that ride. Sure. Other than a few big plays, right? As I think he struggled most of the Texans game, 3 or 4 huge throws in that game. Struggled in the Chargers game, 2 or 3 big throws in that game. Struggled in Seattle, struggled in Denver in the snow and everything. Maybe that was his worst game. So he made some huge throws when he needed to, but yeah, you would say, hey, he faced a lot of pressure on the 4-game playoff run, and it was the defense that carried him. That's fair. Maybe there's a little bit of regression coming, but man, I thought year 2 looked very good for Drake Maye, and that's why he's number 2 in the MVP race.
Yeah, he was not good at all throughout the playoff run, but they were literally the top 4 defenses in the NFL, right? It was 1, 2, 3, and 4 that he faced in some order during that run, with a left tackle who was playing with a bum knee. I mean, you can't completely,
and no arms.
Yeah, you can't completely dismiss it as nothing to do with Drake Maye, but I'd be willing to throw a lot of that out the window, as this is just sort of what happens when you play, the top 4 defenses in the NFL without any kind of caliber offensive lineman. And as we said, like, they improved the offensive line and the receiving core from the worst in the NFL, but they didn't make them good, right? So they went from awful to fine. But again, this fine running up against elite loses, right? A fine offensive line, which Drake Maye's was, runs up against some of the best pass rushing units in the NFL. It's going to get wrecked. Receivers that are okay running up against elite cover guys are going to lose. They're going to get blanketed, right? So, and if those two things are happening at the same time, well, then the quarterback goes back to being, I'm going to try and do all this by myself. I got nothing to work with here. I'm in trouble. And I think that's ultimately what happened in the playoffs for Drake Maye. Is what had been improvements simply ran into the limits of those improvements.
And I would say Maye's coming out party, maybe it was a week 4. They go into Buffalo. They get the early season game in Buffalo against the multi-time division champions.
Yeah.
And they won the second half. It was like 3-0 at the half. And it was Drake Maye out-dueling Josh Allen, making a few big-time throws down the stretch, helping the Patriots win and say, hey, maybe we are that good. So for all the schedule was easy. It absolutely was, especially relative to the Bills. But that was a big early season game. And then I think the thing to keep an eye on for Maye, where I thought he struggled in the playoffs, yes, he was under a lot of pressure. I thought every time pressure was in his face, he was still trying to throw through it, and that led to a lot of volatility. When you're trying to throw while getting hit, still trying to force big plays while under pressure, that led to some turnovers, a bunch of fumbles. That's the type of stuff I think he needs to clean up. But I think let me just go back really quick. I was shocked at how many people, Kurt Warner's of the world, Dan Orlovsky's, I was shocked at how many friends around the league, shocked at how many people soured on Maye during the draft process. I thought we'd go in and be like, guys, got a couple things to clean up. There were some people that were like, dude, he can't do this stuff. He can't his footwork's awful. Yeah. They were like out on him to the point where it's like Jayden Daniels is a clear number 2. Drake Maye is like, yeah, maybe number 3. And I was surprised by that. And I think he proved that wrong last year, that he can do it all. And now he's got to, okay, now let's do it for another season. And it's going to be interesting to see now with A.J. Brown coming in, Romeo Doubs coming in. Those look like upgrades on paper, but we'll see what A.J. Brown has left motivation-wise, if that's going to help as well. Doubs is a really good number 2. Like, they have a good group of receivers there, including the potential high-end number one in A.J. Brown. I know he had Stephon Diggs last year, but A.J. Brown can be a different level of number one. So I think they're in pretty good shape to improve, but it might not all show up because the schedule is going to be, a lot more difficult this year than it was last year.
Yeah.
All right, pick number 3. So we're 3 picks in, all quarterbacks, and then we're blue chip wide receiver. We're talking slam dunk number 1 receiver, but we'll talk about that in a second. It's Marvin Harrison Jr. going to the Arizona Cardinals out of Ohio State at pick number 4. Marvin, now look, I think we both thought he was wide receiver 1. As we got close in the process, a lot of rumblings from those insiders, man. The insiders and then people around the league being like, I think Malik Nabers is wide receiver 1. So there was a lot of people saying Malik Nabers was wide receiver 1, but going in, we all thought Marvin Harrison would be the top wide receiver off the board, and he was at number 4.
Yeah, a bit like the quarterback group you talked about. It was seen as largely a big 3, and any of the 3 would be wide receiver 1 in most draft classes. Marvin Harrison, Malik Nabers, and Rome Odunze. As prospects, I think each one of those guys would be the top wide receiver in most draft classes. Marvin Harrison had been a bit like Caleb Williams, almost the pillar to post. He's going to be wide receiver 1 when he comes out. The best guy on those Ohio State teams that had a ton of wide receivers, this conveyor belt of wide receiver talent, and Marvin Harrison was the guy that was seen as better than all of them. The only questions about him really were he never ran a 40, and there were some people that wondered if he was trying to hide a lack of speed, right? But the tracking data said he had speed. The tape showed him having speed, running by guys, and he said that the NFL, it's not like he sort of declined to run a 40. He said, he basically asked the NFL, did they want him to run the 40? And they're like, nah, we're good. We've seen it. You don't worry about it, right? Now, maybe he was lying, right? Maybe that's just what you say publicly. But I didn't buy that Marvin Harrison was some, slow lumbering player that was hiding a bad 40 time by not running. Anyway, he goes high, and he's not been that player yet. He hasn't looked particularly fast, dynamic. He had this awkward relationship with Kyler Murray where they just couldn't get on the same page ever about anything. Particularly back shoulder throws. One of them was always doing something different to the other one. And he's not been bad, but he hasn't looked like the player that goes 4 overall, is the best wide receiver in a draft class. At this point, it doesn't even look like he has that ceiling in him. And that's different from what people thought when he was coming out.
Yeah, I think the thing that's been lacking, though, is the dynamism and the feel that he is fast. He doesn't feel fast on the field.
And hasn't been.
Yeah, he doesn't feel dynamic off the line of scrimmage. It reminds me a little bit of like when we were describing Ruben Bain and saying he has bend and power, but no get off, right? It's like the missing piece is this thing that usually doesn't, it's a mismatch with the other stuff that he has. I feel like that's Marvin because you watch him. I think for his size, he sinks his hips really well. He gets out of breaks really well. He does have some incredible contested catches and tracking and ball skills. But then then he just had a 10% drop rate last year, and then he got hurt. And so it's I don't know what you do with that. We've talked about drop rate. Like it can go from 4% to 10%. It's like, all right, so he had some awful drops. And his drops last year, remember early in the season how bad stuff was? It was like, dude, you're wide open. There's like, it's a busted coverage. You're going to have a 60-yarder and you're dropping it, right? It's like the drops, it's not like a screen. He is dropping the ball at the worst times. And then remember early in the season, we were watching the Thursday night game against Seattle. We're like, man, he's on a dig route. He stops the route. It's picked off. He's got a drop or whatever that leads to a pick. And then he comes back with the huge contested catch over Devin Witherspoon for a touchdown. It's like, all right, maybe he saved a season. And then there's other games where he's being fed and doing a great job. So I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is still good. And I don't want to keep going back to, if he just catches the ball more consistently this year. I think he's a good receiver. He's been used as a vertical receiver. I'm going to say the same thing as Odunze, top 10 in average depth of target. So he's been used as a vertical receiver. He's not dynamic after the catch. He's not special. I think his route running is still good. He gets open on slants a lot. He can sink his hips, like I said. there's a lot of good receiver stuff that he does, but if the ceiling is limited, as you said, I think it's his ability to just be twitched up and dynamic and quick off the line of scrimmage. And I think that might be the thing that really holds him back. And he ends up just being, dare I say, like a Corey Davis type, where it's like he's a high-end number 2, vertical stem type of receiver, but you don't trust him as the number 1. Just like, he ends up like my guy Corey Davis.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that even the stuff you sort of put down as like definitely a strength, right? As a prospect, like ball skills, that kind of stuff, all that just like none of that's been a strength of the NFL. Even the things that you would have said, nobody questions those. Whatever about, does he run a 4.3? Is he fast? Nobody would have told you that he had anything other than spectacular ball skills or those types of things. And that's been a weakness. So every part of his game has been underwhelming relative to expectations coming into the NFL. The other player that just popped into my head, you mentioned Corey Davis. And we talked about how there's been a run of these quarterbacks that are like actually more athletic in the NFL than you give them credit for in college.
Yeah.
There's some receivers, I think, that go the other way, where they look way more dynamic in college, and then they get to the NFL, and they're either Marvin Harrison Jr., Corey Davis, or Devontae Parker was the guy that I was thinking of, where
that's a good one.
That guy looks so sudden and dynamic in college, gets to the NFL, it's like it's just not working the same. It's not, they're not buying, right? Corners are not buying what you're selling the way they did in college, and suddenly none of that's going to succeed anymore. I wonder if he's going to be one of those guys where he's just a solid NFL player, but is never going to be the dynamic impact player that you think he could be. Or the other thing I was wondering is, what if he got a Ben Johnson type of coach for a couple of years, right? Does he just need actually more coaching than people thought he did coming out? And if he got a real details coach working with him for a year or two, suddenly you get Marvin Harrison Jr. on track, and he'd be the player that people were expecting him to, right? Whatever about the quarterbacks that have been throwing them the ball, maybe he's just been lacking that attention to detail kind of coach that hasn't drilled it into him. Now, really good. I mean, his dad's a Hall of Fame receiver. The receiver coach at Ohio State is, top list of names of best coaches around. So it's not like he's never had, high level insight coming his way, but maybe that is part of why it's all been underwhelming.
Yeah, and we'll wrap it up on Marvin, but you see that he's been coached up to a point, but it's just, I don't know how you teach consistency. Like, I don't know if you hey, you dropped 10% of your passes, like you just got to concentrate better. Like, I don't know how that just gets better. But I think when you go through the tape, it's frustrating because you see all the good stuff other than like, hey, this dude looks like he's dynamic enough to be a go-to number 1 where he's being fed 15 targets a game. And there's 5 of those guys in the league at any given point, but you thought he could be. You don't see that, but I see everything else. I see the ball skills. I see the route running. And he's also been used just as like a simple vertical threat. He'll run some slants from the slot and everything. It's not like he's been put into these high volume opportunistic situations to put up a lot of numbers. He's low completion percentage thrown his way because he's been just a straight up old school vertical receiver. So maybe there's more system wise where he could be freed up as well.
I suspect his confidence is in the floor at the moment as well.
Yeah.
Like I do wonder for receivers in particular, it's a weird confidence position anyway, but also this is probably the first time in his life he's ever had adversity, right? Like this is where the Hall of Fame father plays against you. He's been the son of a Hall of Fame father who's been through the kind of the system where he's always been the best player on the field, right? Including Ohio State. You go through Ohio State, you're the best receiver on this incredible conveyor belt of receiver talent. This is the first time in his life where suddenly he's a problem, right? And I'm not saying that's a permanent thing, but I don't know how that affects your confidence as someone where you get to like 21 before the first time you've ever dealt with any kind of, serious adversity on the field. Like for the first time, what I'm doing is not working. And I don't know what to do with that mentally.
So Harrison goes 4th overall. I think at this point you could say, well, Brian Thomas Jr. had a better rookie season, not as good in year 2. We've seen better from him And we've definitely seen better from Malik Nabers, and maybe all the people before the draft, they were like, hey, I think Malik Nabers might be the best wide receiver in this draft. And I talked to one NFL coach who's like, this might be the best receiver I've ever scouted. That's how much I love Malik Nabers. I think some of those people are maybe on the right side of this based off what we've seen from Nabers to this point. At pick 5, that was the decision for the Los Angeles Chargers. And many times through our time, Sam, we've had this whole tackle or receiver debate. You go back to Penei Sewell and Jamar Chase, and I think we've concluded there was no right answer there. But I think if I had to pick one, I'd probably pick Chase, the receiver for the Bengals, over Sewell, and by a smidge. The Chargers had this debate: massive tackle need, massive wide receiver need. They have a blue chip prospect in Joe Alt at offensive tackle, blue chip prospect in wide receiver Malik Nabers, and they go with Joe Alt here. And then they played the draft and said, look, there's a lot of receivers on the turn. Remember, we thought this was a very deep receiving class, picks 25 through 45, say. And I think the Chargers made the right move here. Joe Alt at 5, and then they get Ladd McConkey on the turn in the second round. Joe Alt's coming off of injury, but excellent rookie season at right tackle and on his way to an even better sophomore campaign at left tackle before the injury, and he'll likely be back to right tackle this year with Rashawn Slater coming back at left tackle.
The counterfactual would have been pretty fascinating, though, because if they'd taken Malik Nabers, number one, we know he's spectacular, but the next tackle off the board in the second round, admittedly, you've got to wait a while, it was Patrick Paul from Miami Dolphins. Now, he was rough enough to begin with, and that would have been seen as a fair reach if they'd taken him at the top of the second. But the way Patrick Paul is playing right now, he looks like a very good offensive tackle. So Malik Nabers and Patrick Paul versus Joe Alt and Ladd McConkey, it's actually still debatable in a way that it normally wouldn't be when you just sort of flip for the next guy available.
And when the Bengals did that, they went, I can't remember, was it Jackson Carman that they got with their second pick? They didn't have the best group of second-round offensive tackles.
Right.
Actually, Arante Ursary, he's starting and, holding his own for the Texans. They actually did have better tackle options here had they gone Malik Nabers first. I've gone back and forth on this. I do think like the anchor blue chip offensive tackle is more rare, and receivers as a whole are easier to find. Maybe not blue chip types, but I think the Chargers made the right move. And as we got closer to the draft, it was like Jim Harbaugh was telling us. He was talking about the offensive line being the most important position on the field, and you can't do anything. He helps your defense. He helps your punter. He helps your kicker. He helps your concession guy. The offensive line helps everybody. And so they go with Joe Alt, and he's a monster. He's very good in pass pro, moves people in the run game, and I think he's just scratching the surface. I think he's got a chance to be top 3 to 5 tackle in the NFL.
Yeah, he looks like somebody who's got the potential to be the best tackle in the NFL, not just one of the best. It was interesting.
Really quick, just to make his case, it's not the best way to do it. The on-off splits once he got hurt, a lot of that has to do with who the replacement was, but Justin Herbert's production tanked once Joe Alt got hurt last year.
Yeah, the big separator, I think, from the rest of that group was his run block. Like Olu Fashanu, I think, looked every bit as good as a pass blocker that Joe Alt did in college, but Joe Alt as a run blocker was just light years ahead of where Fashanu was. He's got both. He's got the incredible pass blocking skills. He's got the incredible run blocking ability, and he's huge. I mean, I think, at some point it's the Planet Theory stuff again. Like at some point you look at a guy like that and you're like, I mean, it's different, right? He's just bigger. He's so much larger than any of these other guys. You saw kind of videos of him at his draft party and whatever cabin they were in, where he's just like engulfs an entire couch by himself, stands up. It's ridiculous. Like he's a huge human being and looks absolutely spectacular for them. And he got injured last year, but theoretically it's a routine enough injury to come back. He should be 100% again. And we get to see just how good he can be over the next couple of years.
So Joe Alt is the pick at 5, and then the Giants go the other way. They get Malik Nabers. Remember, the Giants had questions at quarterback. They were trying to trade up for Drake Maye. They loved Maye. They settle for Malik Nabers, and I think almost immediately he looked like the best receiver in the draft class. They were feeding him early and often. There were games, I thought he almost just looked exhausted in certain games because they were getting him 15, 18 targets during his rookie season. And the same way I said, hey, Marvin Harrison's pretty much just been this outside vertical threat receiver. Malik Nabers has not been that. He's they moved him around, fed him underneath, tried to get him creating after the catch, and he came through, but battled some injuries as a rookie and then missed a lot of time in year 2 coming down with the ACL injury.
Yeah, so on the field, he looks spectacular. He looks like by far the best of these receivers. He's everything we talked about Marvin Harrison not being, right? He's dynamic, he's explosive. Like he's got that sort of Jamar Chase thing where it's like it's just more explosive, more dynamic than you're expecting every single time you run up against him. The Giants realized it right away. They were using him all over the place. And he looks like a spectacular receiver. Now, it's not like it's off the field, but the concern is now the injuries, which is multiple concussions, including ones that have lingered, and then this knee injury, which is proving more serious than initially believed. And we've got our guy, anyone that's listened long enough to remember the boo-boo breakdowns we did with our guy Vic Troja, we've got a show coming out on Monday that we recorded yesterday where we go through team by team and sort of everyone's major injury questions. The Malik Nabers thing doesn't sound great. Like he's had multiple procedures now, a cleanup procedure, but the thing they cleaned up is not a usual thing. And it's like, we might not be seeing him for a while this season. Like forget week 1, we might not be seeing him for a chunk of this year. It's partly the sort of added complications, but every time he has one of these, anytime he has one of these sort of procedures, it sets the time scale back, right? Because the thing they're cleaning up means it's non-load bearing, and now that resets your clock to rehab. And so, we're not getting Malik Nabers back right away, is what I'm saying.
Man, it's unfortunate because first off, Jackson Dart and that team, they need him. I mean, again, what he looks like as a potential number 1, his after the catch ability, the same thing that I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is lacking, Malik Nabers has. Yeah. Where you're just like, man, I think he can get behind the defense as a route runner. I think you can get the ball in his hands. Kind of like when Jamar Chase, who should have been just a vertical threat, and then you're like, oh, by the way, he can take a slant to the house and he can take a screen to the house. Nabers has that ability when he's healthy. But you mentioned, like, it's not just this knee and the cleanup. He's had back, hip, groin, an ankle sprain. He's had a lot of injuries these first couple of years. It felt like you were watching him in a car crash every time he played with the Giants, in part because they were feeding him and they were treating him like a number 1. So it's something to keep an eye on here. But when he's healthy, man, I think he's been the best and most consistent of all the receivers in this draft class.
Yeah.
All right.
Agreed.
Pick 7. So now we've got a tackle, receiver. These are all high value positions coming off the board, and it's going to be all the way until forever. J.C. Latham is the next pick off the board, the next tackle off the board. Tennessee Titans take him at 7. There was some debate between Latham, Olu Fashanu, Taliese Fuaga, some of these offensive tackles. Latham goes pretty high here at 7, a little bit higher than I had expected, but a lot of people did like him, an absolute monster out of Alabama. The other interesting story out of this draft was the number of right tackles who got drafted and then either moved to the left side or whatever. So J.C. Latham was a college right tackle, and they said, no, you could go play left tackle. This is a new development in the NFL in the last, 5 to 10 years that never happened previously. And ironically, both Latham and Fuaga did it and then ended up moving back to their original right side. But Latham, I think he's had an okay career. He played left tackle year 1, looked like, hey, he's still getting used to, left tackle. And then he moves to right tackle in year 2. I thought he would take a bigger step forward, but he still has a few too many quick losses in pass protection. He's not give up territory. It's not like a bust or anything, but you want a little bit more from the 7th overall pick heading into year 3.
Yeah, I mean, it was a strong tackle class. You mentioned that a bit. We've got, obviously, Joe Alt, J.C. Latham was next off the board. We're talking now Olu Fashanu, who you mentioned before, Fuaga with the Saints, Amarius Mims, Troy Fautanu later on, Jordan Morgan, if you still want to call him a tackle. Now he's moving back to tackle, right? Tyler Guyton. So a lot of tackles in this first round, as typically happens. Latham was a polarizing prospect, which I think tends to happen with these Alabama tackles who all seem to be vaguely similar most of the time. These sort of big, hulking, but oftentimes kind of plodding. offensive tackles. I tend not to like those guys, but there are people that really do like those guys as a general rule of thumb. So nobody quite knew where he would go. A little bit like Caden Proctor this year. He ends up going again. It's usually a case of how high the highest guy likes you as opposed to the average or the lowest, right? You only need one team. Tennessee takes him at 7. I had too many concerns about the foot speed, just how plodding he was. Didn't love him overall. Certainly didn't like him at the 7th overall pick. And as you said, now it's kind of TBD. Does he take another step forward at right tackle? Are they going to have to kick him into guard and try and Robert Gallery his career? What exactly are we going to get out of him going forward?
Yeah, and to be clear, I think when we a later show, we'll break down Broderick Jones as a first-round offensive tackle, who I would say has been well below average to the point where he's battling for his job. Later on this show, we're going to talk about Tyler Guyton, who I think has been way below average and is actually fighting for his job. I don't think Latham's there. I don't think he's competing at right tackle or anything, but I think he's just in this world where he could just be an average starting right tackle. His ceiling might be average right tackle. Now, I am smart enough at this point, Sam, in my football analysis career to not write off offensive tackles who aren't completely overwhelmed. He hasn't been completely overwhelmed in his first 2 years. You don't write those guys off. They can become what I would consider solid, slightly above average starters. Happens all the time. Happens at year 3, 4, and 5. Everybody's heard me say this a bunch. Latham's in that territory where this year, next year is the time when you would take a jump and you would say, he's fine. He's dependable. We would actually pay him $20 million in a couple of years, and we're okay with him at right tackle. The concern, of course, is he's big. He moves okay. Never really adjusted to inside counters, and he just has, again, too many just pure whiffs in pass pro. He can move people in the run game, though. He is a run game weapon. When he wins, he creates a lot of movement at the point of attack. So then we have pick number 8, Sam. And there's a fear that we could go down this rabbit hole for another 30 minutes, as we have many times on this show. At pick 8, the Atlanta Falcons are on the board. Every single mock draft said the Falcons just signed Kirk Cousins. You've got a free agent quarterback. All you need, Falcons, is a pass rush. And you are in a great spot, Falcons, because the 7 teams ahead of you all needed quarterbacks and receivers and offensive tackles. And this is exactly how the board fell, Falcons. You have exactly what you want. The pick of all of the best defensive players. Pick the best pass rusher. You've needed a pass rusher for a decade, Falcons. And they go and select Michael Penix Jr., the quarterback out of Washington, at pick number 8. And I think we were the only two that just, we at least tried to make some sense of it. What were they thinking here? And I gave him credit. Gave Terry Fautanu credit for thinking outside the box, for thinking critically about the quarterback position, for doubling down, for over-investing in the quarterback position. Yeah, you paid Kirk Cousins this money, but you also drafted the quarterback that you absolutely love in Michael Penix Jr. So that's where the Falcons go at pick 8. The shock of the draft, maybe the shock of the maybe the last 10 years of drafts here, Michael Penix Jr.
Yeah, so that's the other thing. Big picture wise in this draft, this was the draft where the first 14 players were offensive side of the ball, right? The first defensive player didn't come off the board until 15, which is crazy. And then this is the other thing that this draft is remembered for, which is this one of the biggest shocks in the first round this century. The Falcons, who had just signed Kirk Cousins, they go and double down. They grab Michael Penix Jr. And it absolutely blew people's minds. I feel kind of bad because it's like I feel like we almost undersold just how wild it is, because it sort of made sense to us, right? And we were the first people that were kind of constructing the argument for why it's not terrible, right? Because Cousins is 35 years old, coming off an Achilles. You don't know exactly, how long you're going to have him. And much like this year with Ty Simpson, right? It's about securing the orderly succession at the most important position in the NFL. And we also knew that the Falcons loved Michael Penix Jr., right? And that's part of it. He was a guy who was seen for most people as a, borderline first round, second round turn kind of guy, right? Top of the second round, bottom of the first round. That's where people expected him to go. But we knew the Falcons loved the guy, right? And so that immediately puts him into play anywhere because that's just the nature of the position.
We knew that the Falcons loved him, right? We had it on good authority. But we assumed, all right, second round, right? Maybe in the second round because that's where he could go. And we didn't know that there'd be 6 quarterbacks in the top 12. Going into the draft, we thought, okay, J.J. McCarthy might be QB4. There were rumblings about, maybe the Vikings go get him at 4, but he probably doesn't get past 10. And then we think, well, maybe Penix and Nix are more late first, early second on the turn type of players. And maybe that's where the Falcons could have been in play. And they're like, nope, they took him at 8.
But the point is, it's like the Simpson thing, right? Once you know a team loves a quarterback, it puts him into play anywhere because
it does.
If they think he's the guy, it doesn't matter where. Effectively, doesn't matter where you take him. So what we had thought, like the obvious, and I think the plan would have been, we play Cousins for a year or 2, probably 2 years, and then we turn the keys over to Michael Penix Jr., and that's the next 10, 15 years of the franchise, right? Exactly like the Rams are planning with Matthew Stafford and Ty Simpson. Now, it's harder to argue in terms of like the roster. Like the Rams were in a position this year where their roster is basically set. They could take a first-round pick, use it on a future quarterback, effectively redshirt, and it doesn't matter. Harder to make that argument for the Falcons. Like they needed a pass rusher, and instead they decided to go with the quarterback. But logically, the reason is the same, right? If you hit on the succession plan at quarterback, it's more important than anything you can do. It's more important than any single position you can draft, whether it's edge rusher, offensive tackle, wide receiver, it doesn't matter. Hitting that guy is the only thing that matters. And if you think that's your guy, quarterback is the one position where I think it's completely justifiable to say, I don't care about the consensus. I don't care about other opportunity costs. Nothing else matters. We're taking that guy. So I think we were very quick to be like, there's an argument here that makes a lot of sense. Now, unfortunately, from their perspective, Cousins is not capable of making it through 2 years. He wasn't capable of making it through 1 year, let alone 2 years. And then Michael Penix has this amazing, cameo at the back end of his rookie year, and then year 2 doesn't look good at all. And right now, it doesn't look like he's going to be that succession plan that's going to work, long term, or certainly needs to bounce back to prove that he can be that guy. But at the time, I think it wasn't as crazy as it looked. It was wild. It was certainly, unconventional, shocking, all those things. But I got the argument behind it.
Yeah. I mean, my point at the time with Penix was you have to come at this from the angle of not being overconfident in your quarterback evaluations. And remember, a lot of the criticism, Sam, was it was a reach. He was 29 on the consensus board, or 38, or he's a second round quarterback. That's fine. A lot of people did not love Michael Penix as a prospect. Fine. I come at this differently in my old age here, Sam, where I say I don't have overconfident quarterback projections now. I already know it's a low hit rate, right? The hit rate on finding the franchise, just a starting caliber quarterback, is low. And then finding one that you want to build around for 10 years is even lower. I already know that. And then the alternative is, like, how much better is Atlanta right now if they had Dallas Turner, Laiatu Latu, Jared Verse, or whichever edge rusher they would have loved, that they were getting Mox Dallas Turner left and right. Like, how much better is this team if they just got Dallas Turner versus the world where Michael Penix became their future quarterback and they gave up the starting pass rusher? It might be a low percentage hit, but that was what they're playing. Now, Penix as a prospect was coming off of a great year in Washington with 3 receivers who all went in the first 3 rounds. And he has this injury history of multiple ACLs, and he just got hurt last year with an ACL. So that was the injury history, 6-year player. Those things were concerns. He had an outstanding college football playoff game against Texas. It was almost CJ Stroud-esque, right? We always talk about the Stroud-Georgia game. That was like, man, ticked every box. Penix did that against Texas. The problem was Stroud lost his Georgia game, and then that was the last thing we saw. Penix won the Texas game, goes to the college football playoff final, and loses to Michigan. Looked awful during that game. So we saw him not look good in his final game. But you mentioned, like, his rookie season, Penix was making big-time throws left and right. He was feeding Drake London. he looked like that it could have been the right move until last year. It was very inconsistent week to week. He was not throwing the ball to the middle of the field, not seeing it. Very inconsistent, and then gets the injury. So, and now you've got a completely new regime, and a regime that certainly does not love Michael Penix the same way. Right. Terry Fautanu and Raheem Morris and Zach Robinson all seem to love Michael Penix. So I'm not really sure what the future is. And the Falcons aren't necessarily incentivized to see what Michael Penix Jr. I think they are, just because he's still under rookie contract for a couple of years, but they have Tua for like $10 this year. So it's not really a massive money save, having Penix be your guy going forward.
No, I mean, they're incentivized to see what he has because he's the more likely of the two quarterbacks they have under contract to have any kind of future with the team. But if he doesn't, like if they don't see anything early, they're not tied to him in the way the previous regime would have been. Just going back to was it crazy to take him where they took him? I don't think the age thing matters, to be honest.
No,
it's like if you're going to take a quarterback to be the successor in 2 years' time, only take a guy who's 21, who's only got 8 starts under his belt. I don't think that matters. You take a quarterback you think can be the next guy, and if you believe there's power to developing from the sideline, it's going to help whether he's 24, 21, whether he's got 8 starts under his belt, whether he's got 45 college starts under his belt. Either way, it works. The injury history, I think, is a valid criticism, but at that time, he'd had a year of health. There was a year of sort of clear play under his belt after those injury concerns. If he checked out medically, there's no reason necessarily to go, well, he's only a few months away from another ACL. Like, obviously we should have seen that coming. It would have been a red flag. It would have been something the medical teams obviously poured over, but if they cleared him, they cleared him, right? I don't think that necessarily should have kept you away from drafting him in the first round either. I think they took a shot on a guy, and right now it doesn't look like they've picked the right guy.
Yeah, my final word on it, maybe until next time, is we spent a lot of time at the time. Thank you to Terry Fautanu for giving us this exercise and team building that we have to discuss. You can't criticize teams for never having a quarterback. Oh, you never had a quarterback. Think about the number of franchises, like the Dolphins trying to recover post Dan Marino. And this is what went into it. I think Arthur Blank's like, man, after Matt Ryan, we didn't have a plan, right? And then they said, hey, now we're going to have a double plan. We're going to have a Kirk Cousins and a drafted quarterback. Like, I have vowed to never criticize a team for over-investing in the quarterback position for the 2 reasons, right? If it hits, it's unbalanced, right? Like if the question was, you can have a Michael Penix hit or Jared Verse, knowing what we know about Jared Verse, you have to take the quarterback if you know he's going to hit, but it's a lower percentage chance. So I'm not going to hate on a team for over-investing and trying to do that so that you're not playing this game where it's like, maybe Carson Wentz will start for us this year. Like, I'm okay with a team never wanting to live in that world and drafting quarterbacks until they find one.
And they look like they've taken the wrong quarterback in Michael Penix Jr. as of right now. But the wanting some kind of insurance policy for Kirk Cousins part was right? Like, you just signed Cousins, but immediately it became clear that he wasn't the guy that you wanted at the position either. So
coming off an Achilles of his own, right?
Right. But like that part of it, the idea that, oh, why would you take a quarterback? You just signed this guy, Kirk Cousins. Well, that part of it was correct. Like, they needed another solution because Cousins wasn't the guy that was going to take this team for, the next several years. So that part of it was fine. It was the fact that, the guy you picked hasn't actually worked out yet.
Anything else on Michael Penix? Pick number 8, hour and 10 minutes into the show here, man.
No, let's move.
The biggest stage in world soccer is here, and every goal changes everything. And now FanDuel is giving you a reason to root for every single one. Introducing Every Goal Pays. Bet on a match and get bonus bets for every goal scored in that match. That's right. More goals means more bonus bets, and all you have to do is turn on your token. What are you looking for here, Sam? We're in the final 8 here. Rest in peace to America.
No more USA.
Valiant effort again. That was a rough game last week.
Yeah, valiant effort until that game. Then it became not valiant anymore.
They even convinced you for a minute that they could potentially make a run, but that was they were overmatched there.
I mean, it was their worst performance against the first good team they played, that wasn't an ideal combination. Either one of those things might have been okay, but both of them together was bad.
What are we looking for going forward here?
Top scorer is still the thing. Like, all the strikers are still firing. They're all still in it, the big ones. So yeah, who's going to get the golden boot will be fun.
A few more goals this year than usual. Feels like it.
Yeah, definitely from the top scorers. Like, tournament, the golden boot has been won by guys with like 7 goals in the past. Like, now all the top guys are above that.
It's a juice ball from the opening whistle to the final kick. Let there be goals on FanDuel, and it's a great year with all the goals happening. Visit FanDuel.com/33rd to get started now. Must be 21 plus in select states. For Kansas, an affiliation with Kansas Star Casino. 18 plus in D.C., Kentucky, or Wyoming. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 1-800-MY-RESET. Call 1-888-789-7777. Visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, or call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. We are on to pick number 9, and this is where the Chicago Bears take Rome Odunze, wide receiver out of Washington. So back-to-back Washington picks here. And for the Bears, remember, the previous year they had traded the number 1 overall pick to the Carolina Panthers. They traded down, obviously, picked up Darnell Wright, and they are just stacking the opposite side of the balance sheet in that Bryce Young trade. And now the Bryce Young trade is like one Bryce Young for all of these players. And all of these players are including Darnell Wright, Caleb Williams, and now Rome Odunze. And when that trade was made, we were all looking forward saying, hey, the Bears might be able to get Caleb Williams, or they might be able to get a top quarterback and a receiver. They might be able to get Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison. Who knows? They get Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze, who you said earlier in the show. He'd be wide receiver 1 in a lot of other draft classes that didn't feature Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Nabers.
Yeah, it felt like an absolute slam dunk for them. Steal. Like, they get obviously Caleb Williams at the top of the draft, and then they get one of those big 3 receivers that we were talking about inside the top 10 in a draft where we thought, all 3 of those guys could be gone well inside the top 10. Like, they mightn't have had any of them available. They do. They get the 3rd one available. And yeah, Odunze did seem like a top tier prospect in his own right, a guy that could be wide receiver 1 in most draft classes. Big, strong, fast enough, good at the catch point. I would say he's been good so far, but hasn't been like him. None of the ones except Malik Nabers, and even he's had the injury sort of question marks, but he's the only one that sort of really matched those pre-draft prospect expectations. Odunze's been good. He hasn't been great yet. And that, I think, is still on the table for him.
I think there's some similarities to Marvin where he's been used as a vertical threat, top 10 in average depth of target. When you get that, it's like, hey, they're only completing 52% of passes going his way. It's because he's, been used down the field a little bit more. The thing to keep an eye out for Odunze, I think he's shown flashes of everything he had at Washington. Still think he moves pretty well in and out of routes, the contested catch ability, the spectacular catch ability. Like, he's shown flashes of that at the NFL level. Again, it's just a matter of doing it more often. And then he was talking about this offseason. He's got this foot injury that he called the new normal that he's trying to battle through. Just something to keep an eye on if injuries are always going to be maybe hampering Odunze a little bit. But he's in this system, too, where he's not going to be necessarily this featured number 1. Ben Johnson's system isn't dependent on just one receiver, but I think he does what he's asked pretty well. So I think he's been fine. But maybe you would say maybe him and Marvin Harrison for top 10 wide receivers, slightly underwhelming for what you would want to get at that position.
And particular because, again, we talked about those big 3 guys all being wide receiver 1 in most draft classes. Only one of them, I think, has lived up to those types of lofty expectations in Nabers. The other 2 guys have not.
All right, we're going to go a lot quicker through the rest of the first round here. J.J. McCarthy's the next pick at pick 10. Minnesota Vikings, the 5th quarterback in the top 10. Still all offensive players off the board. Vikings made the big decision. No, this was the year they brought in bridge quarterback Sam Darnold and then drafted J.J. McCarthy. I think the plan was sound on paper. Yeah. The decision was move on from Kirk Cousins. Remember, Kwesi came in. They got out of some cap issues. They let Kirk Cousins walk, which was hurting their ability to do stuff in free agency. Then they start doing a lot in free agency with the freed up money, and they go 1 year, $10 million for Sam Darnold, who becomes I called him the best bridge quarterback in NFL history in 2024 because he was signed to be a bridge quarterback, and then goes on and they win 14 games. And then they draft J.J. McCarthy to sit and develop, and then J.J. actually looked pretty good in his one preseason game. And then after the game, they were just like, oh, he's got a season-ending knee injury. He's done. And that was his rookie season.
This is the funny thing about, process versus results, because you could argue that 2 consecutive years faced with some pretty challenging quarterback questions, the Vikings had really sound process. And in 1 year, it kind of worked for the wrong reasons. And then the next year, it didn't work at all, even though I think both years it made logical sense. So step number 1, you've got Cousins' contract is due. He's coming off an Achilles injury. He's 35. He wants a ton of money. They draw a financial line in the sand and they say, if you want more than this, go seek it elsewhere. We're not paying that. That's smart. That was the correct decision. Cousins goes to Atlanta. He signs for big money there. Doesn't work out. He doesn't look the same guy. It would have been awful in Minnesota. So that was the correct decision. You signed Sam Darnold 1 year, $10 million as a bridge quarterback. Okay, that's fine. And then he ends up actually playing out of his mind for you. So that turns out to be a fantastic decision. And then they apparently wanted Drake Maye. Okay, that was process-wise. Apparently that was the correct decision as well. You were trying to get the right quarterback. You didn't end up making it happen. And then they stayed disciplined, and they stayed almost at number 11. They trade up 1 spot to go get McCarthy at number 10. So you waited it out. You didn't do anything crazy. You select the 5th quarterback off the board, and now that guy can sit behind Darnold for a while, or however, like a guy that theoretically needed some development. It looked like from that preseason game he was going to win the job, and then ends up being on the shelf for year 1. But like overall, that's pretty good process, right? And then it ends up working out spectacularly because Darnold goes and has a career year for Kevin O'Connell, makes himself a ton of money. The next year, you're left with a similar sort of dilemma. Okay, do we now pay Darnold based off this season that he just had, albeit with a collapse at the end of it in the 2 most important games? Or do we take the money that we could give Darnold, invest in the offensive line, which was awful, and then turn the keys over to McCarthy, who looked like he was going to win the job anyway, right? That's what they end up doing, and that doesn't work out for anybody. Darnold ends up backing up the season in Seattle, if not playing better. McCarthy looks garbage, and they have the worst quarterback situation in the room. But like every step of the way, that feels like pretty good process. One time it kind of worked in their favor. One time it didn't. And when it doesn't, Kwesi gets drop kicked out of the room. It's kind of fascinating the mercy you're at to just blind ass luck, even when you're doing generally solid evaluation.
And then part of it, though, is like the history of Kevin O'Connell. I mean, the Vikings have one of the best. Let me go back, man. I thought J.J. McCarthy stepped into one of the best situations any rookie quarterback had stepped into in recent time. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison before having some of the off-field issues, T.J. Hawkinson. You don't get that trio at just anywhere. The offensive line wasn't – I know it collapsed a little bit at the end of the Darnold 24 season. It wasn't like the whole line was a disaster, though. They still have 2 of the better bookend tackles in the NFL, and Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill. It wasn't what Drake Maye stepped into from an offensive line perspective or what some of the other quarterbacks have in recent years. So I thought it was one of the best situations. And then even when they let Darnold walk, then they do invest in the offensive line even more, shore up the middle 3. Then it was really one of the better situations that a new starting quarterback could step into last year with J.J. McCarthy, and it just looked awful. And a lot of the questions for J.J. coming out, most of the pre-draft analysis was this dude never lost games, high school, college, 15-0 Michigan team. However, the way Michigan won those games was throwing 14 tight ends out there, running the ball like crazy, including a Penn State game where they literally didn't throw the ball in the second half with J.J. McCarthy as quarterback. So you had this idea, was he the passenger or was he and he had, I called them the Harbaugh games, 16 of 21 for $170 and 3 touchdowns or whatever. He had those types of games in college, right? These low volume, high rushing attempts, type of games like Michigan football of the 90s. And so that was a question. Could he carry an offense? Could you rely on him? I think as a thrower, he was a very flat ball thrower. He made very few touch throws in college. Everything was on a line. He had a good arm. I thought his athleticism was pretty good. I mean, he might be one of the quarterbacks where his athleticism looks a little bit worse than expected, maybe at the NFL level. Maybe he's the opposite of what I was describing with Josh Allen and Jackson Dart and Caleb Williams. Maybe his athleticism's a bit worse than I expected. So that was what he was coming in as a prospect. And I think, a lot of the concern column, I think, popped up a lot in his first year as a starter.
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, he was really efficient as a college quarterback, but in a role that was not much was asked of him. And the question was always, does that scale, right? Can you just increase how much you're asking of him, and does his efficiency maintain, and he just has bigger numbers that way? Well, so far, the answer to that is no. When more is asked of him, he does not scale the same level of performance, and he's wilted when more has been asked of him. I think that the thing you mentioned about not layering throws is a really important part as well. Like, there's no touch to his passing. There's no layering of throws. It's like you identify a target and rifle the ball in there and hope it gets to your target. Can't do that at the NFL level. You need more nuance to how you're putting the ball in there. You need to be able to clear defenders. You need to be able to drop it into windows as opposed to just firing them through the window sometimes. So, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but he's still young, relatively inexperienced. I think he's lost the job in that it's Kyler Murray's now. Doesn't necessarily mean he's lost, his career. I think he would be a classic potential reclamation project somewhere down the line. Maybe he even gets another opportunity from Minnesota if Kyler gets hurt again, and he, having had some time on the bench, some time to develop, it looks a lot better second time around than he did first time around. But so far, the decision to, go away from Darnold, invest elsewhere, and turn the keys over to McCarthy didn't work.
Maybe he goes and backs up Justin Herbert, go back to maybe Jim Harbaugh with the Chargers or something. It does feel like his time in Minnesota is going to be done, and Minnesota is going to go with Kyler Murray. As someone in the chat brings up, it sounds exactly like the Sam Darnold conversation 5 or 6 years ago, and it might, right? I mean, my question there's always two sides of these stories, right? People are very good in hindsight. Very, very good. Hindsight's 2020. Very good at telling you what you should have done. All right, so tell us what we should do. What should the Vikings do right now? Everybody wants to find the next Sam Darnold. So should the Vikings just ride it out for the next 4 years with J.J. McCarthy? Because that's what it took for Sam Darnold to finally hit. Do you just ride it out? Make the call right now. Should you just ride it out? Should the Bucs have just rode it out with Jameis Winston and the Titans with Marcus Mariota? Darnold is the very best recent success story of a reclamation project, but it's not like the NFL doesn't try reclamation projects. Everybody goes, LOL, why are you bringing the Carson Wentz back in? Why are you bringing in this guy? Why are you bringing in this failed experiment? Why are you even signing Zach Wilson? The point with quarterbacks is 10% hit in every situation, right? 10% of your first rounders become what you want. 10% of your reclamation projects. It's always a low percentage proposition. So if you're a believer in JJ McCarthy, then ride it out. Just let him go and see what happens. But you have to be willing to take the bumps until he figures it out. And I think that's the challenge for teams, is as soon as a guy shows that maybe he's not ready, do you want to be the one that sits there and waits for him to develop? Or do you want to just, hey, I'll let someone else do it, and if he hits, fine. That's part of the problem of, what do you do right now if you're Minnesota? And I think it was so bad last year that they just couldn't wait it out and can't wait it out. So they have Kyler Murray for $10, like I said, the same Tua price. All right. JJ McCarthy probably going to have to figure it out somewhere else. Pick 11, Olu Fashanu, still all offensive players. Penn State offensive tackle goes to the Jets. I had thought that the Jets could go Brock Bowers here, because remember they had Aaron Rodgers. He was coming back off the Achilles. I thought Brock Bowers would have been the guy that they would have loved here. Maybe they would have in hindsight, but Fashanu comes in to play offensive tackle. Then they end up signing the offensive tackle last year, and Armand Membu and everything. They've got their future bookend tackles. Fashanu's been pretty good. We both loved him as a pass protector at left tackle at Penn State. He did not need to come in and play right away. He was their number 3 tackle. and he was their swing tackle. That was like the one thing I didn't want him doing, was playing the right side and moving around. I thought he was just a plug and play long-term left tackle. I thought he struggled a little bit as a rookie, got better last year when he settled in as the left tackle of the future.
Yeah, I was surprised how I thought he looked pretty rough as a rookie. Year 2, though, I thought he definitely found his feet. He looks good again as a pass blocker. Run blocking is not there yet. Both seasons, I think that may be a weakness of his game permanently. It may just be the weaker side, but as a lockdown, athletic mirror type of tackle at left tackle, he's always had these where he has a bit like Will Campbell we talked about, where he has just some losses, more clean,
his reps,
weird losses,
some really bad reps that feel like his fault too.
With Campbell, you can at least explain it with some sort of physical limitations and be like, okay, he's got short arms, the smallest wingspan of any off. Like Fashanu's a prototypical athlete, right? He's got the technique. It's just there's some weird reps in there where he loses, where it doesn't make any sense to me. But he had those in college. He's got them so far at the NFL level. The baseline, I think, is very good after year 2, but I wonder if he's ever going to clean those up, or if those are just going to be like an annoying lingerance for his entire career.
I would describe Will Campbell's losses as they're against players that are really good, and he just gets better player beats him, right? Which you always described as like the Charles Leno. They're like Will Campbell concern might be he just runs into some better pass rushers, and he's going to look bad at times because when he faces Danielle Hunter, he can't do it. When Fashanu loses, dating all the way back to when JTT at Ohio State got him, I'm like, he's not overwhelmed. This is Fashanu's fault. Like, why is your
they're just random bad reps.
Pass set so bad? Like, it's like you changed your pass set completely. So he still has those random bad reps that are Fashanu's fault. So I always chalk that up to he'll clean those up. That's 5 to 10 plays a year. He'll clean those up. He'll get better. Still believe he has that in him. He's also in this interesting world of better pass protector than run blocker. Call that a Laramie Tunsil type. And then looking forward to this year's draft, Jordan Seaton, former 5-star who played at Colorado for 2 years and is now at LSU, is extreme in this world where he's crazy athletic, looks excellent in pass pro, looks like has no clue what he's doing in the run game. And there's some similarities to him and Fashanu. And it's my own little like internal player evaluation storyline of these players that have these extreme splits. Fashanu had that, still has to figure it out run game wise. I'm going to be keeping an eye on Seaton this year at LSU. Similar type of player. Mm-hmm. So that's Fashanu at 11. And by the way, the Jets, as bad as they were last year, durable, pretty dependable offensive line. Fashanu, a big part of that. Pick number 12, the 6th quarterback off the board out of the top 12. It's Bo Nix going to the Denver Broncos. We got to be honest about this, Sam. We considered this, hey, the Broncos just took QB 6 out of 6. The last guy. Did they just take the remnant? They just needed a quarterback. Did they just take what was left? Did they love him? Every time there's a post-draft story, the post-draft story is like, well, Sean Payton always wanted him, always wanted Bo Nix. Well, why didn't he go get him? We did get former general manager of the Las Vegas Raiders, Tom Telesco, because the Raiders were picking 13th, and we didn't know if the Broncos were definitely going to take a quarterback here. The Raiders were going to take a quarterback, and then we asked Telesco. There were a lot of rumblings about them taking Michael Penix, and he admitted, at least on our show here, that they would have gone Bo Nix over Michael Penix Jr. had he been available here. So it's not like the Broncos were on a complete island taking Bo Nix at 12, but similar to Michael Penix Jr., I think a lot of people expected Nix to go either late first or into the second, and he goes here at 12 to the Broncos, and I think they're feeling pretty good about it 2 years in.
Yeah, definitely. That's the thing. It was like if you wanted a quarterback, he was the only one left. But it did seem like, I mean, he was the quarterback that was being connected to Denver, to Sean Payton the whole way, right? Like part of that is sort of where they're picking and who you're going to have available. But it made sense that Denver would target Bo Nix. It's just that by the time that rolled around, that was literally the only option available. So, it's always hard to sort of say, did they just reach for the last guy because they needed a quarterback, or was this their guy the whole way and they just got lucky that the board fell their way and they had available their top target effectively. But so far, I mean, he's had a weird career because if you really want to, you can make the argument based off a couple of weird things that he's the best quarterback from this entire class. I don't think he has been, but he's been good and better than a lot of the sort of detractors would say. But he's also had weird spates where he like doesn't make a play for a long period of time and then suddenly catches fire.
Yeah, again, we could spend a lot of time on Bo Nix. I think he has been, every quarterback is a hot button debate issue because it's the quarterback position. I do feel like Nix, it's like the widest range of discussions. You have, as you said, you could pull out stats like touchdowns through 2 years, and you would just say, well, Bo Nix is Peyton Manning. And then you could just pick out whatever, find some throws where he doesn't look great and be like, Bo Nix stinks, and it's just the Broncos defense and it's Sean Payton. As usual, the truth is somewhere in between. I don't think Bo Nix is the best quarterback in this class. I would say Jayden Daniels and Drake Maye have both played better football than him overall. Caleb Williams has maybe played similar football, but in a completely different way. But let me just be safe with it. Bo Nix has been very impressive to me. There were times I wanted to write him off. The footwork can be erratic. The accuracy could be erratic. But I think he's tightened that up a lot. And I also believe you could make the argument the receiving core has been okay, not great. Now we get to see him with Jalen Waddle. And I do think Sean Payton's been a little up and down, right? Like the trust with Nix has improved. And I think Payton has started to like really open up his offense and trust him a little bit more and do some more stuff. And they've been better. Now the offense last year, there were times where they would just disappear for 3 quarters and then just turn it on in the 4th. And that's where some of the hate comes in for Nix. It's like, you guys weren't even good. And then in the 4th quarter, you just made a comeback. But I think he deserves credit for that. I think his scrambling has been outstanding, his scrambling timing, and he's made some huge throws in big games. Playoff game against both playoff games against Buffalo, games in Kansas City, just general games against the Chiefs. So, like, if you want to make the Bo Nix argument, I just don't like bad faith arguments. A bad faith argument is look at Bo Nix's touchdown passes stacked up against history just because he hasn't missed any regular season games, 17-game schedule. He played the Chiefs backups in the last game of 2024. Like, just don't make a bad faith argument if you want to support Bo Nix. The good faith argument for Bo Nix is in crunch time, yes, they have a great defense. In crunch time, he's made some huge throws, huge runs, and he's played winning football for that team. He's had a good defense. He has Sean Payton. He's played winning football. So make a good faith Bo Nix argument, and I can hear it. The bad faith argument is, look, he's got the most touchdowns, and Payton. Like, that's not indicative of how Bo Nix has played, but there are other ways to defend his play, and I would say I've been far more impressed with Bo Nix maybe than I had anticipated.
Yeah, I mean, he's just the most difficult one, I think, to kind of quantify and to actually articulate and describe what he is, because I think his play has been it's been unusual. Like the scrambling thing has been a huge part of his game. He's been really effective, really dynamic scrambling. A lot of his best play is in the 4th quarter. That's great. It's also probably not sustainable, probably noisy, right? So it's difficult trying to nail down exactly what he is. And then obviously, right when it looked like Denver was going to go to the Super Bowl, he has this weird injury thing where it's like comes out of the game, amazing win, beats Buffalo. They're going to go play the Patriots in the AFC Championship game. And then like 10 minutes after the game, it's like, oh, by the way, Bo Nix's ankle's broken. He's not going to be playing next week. What? So then, absent a quarterback, Patriots basically get a bye in through to the Super Bowl. Denver goes home, but Bo Nix had Denver on the precipice of going to a Super Bowl with an amazing defense that potentially would have given Seattle a better game than the Patriots did.
And then really quick, just to touch on Bo Nix as a prospect, awesome story, right? He goes to Auburn. That's his team. He's the hero. He faces Justin Herbert in his first game as a true freshman, throws a walk-off game-winning touchdown, but then the rest of his Auburn career is erratic and all over the place, and it's bad decisions, and he rarely plays from the pocket. And then he transfers from Auburn and goes to Oregon and completely changes who he is as a player. And I called him, it looked like his first 2 years at Auburn, he played like Jay Cutler. And his last 2 years at Oregon, he played like Alex Smith, right? Two opposite ends of the spectrums, like a wild gunslinger type all the way to the most conservative quarterback who never turned it over and completed 75% of his passes at Oregon. You never saw that. And it's like the new world of college football. You get to see that. Over 60 starts. He's got the double Parcells. Just a fascinating prospect. Our guy Mike Renner loved Bo Nix. Not a lot of people truly believed in him.
Yeah.
And he's been good, right? He was this perceived like low tools player, but that's not really what he is. He's got plenty of tools because that's what he was at Auburn. He was just a bag of tools who had never figured it out yet. He almost did the Josh Allen type of thing, but in college, where he transformed his game within college rather than in the NFL. So just a very fascinating prospect and a polarizing quarterback because he's winning a lot of games and Denver's defense is fantastic, but he's a part of it. But he's also maybe not as good as the record would show or the touchdown passes would show. So somewhere in between, but I've been impressed with Nix to this point, and Denver, I think, is in a good spot. By the way, I would also say, like, kudos to Sean Payton, too. We've seen a lot of coaches who have had the elite quarterbacks not be able to sustain that success. So we got to see Sean Payton in a situation without Drew Brees for now an extended period of time, and he looks like he is a game changer, right? Like Bill Belichick was unable to do this in New England. And Andy Reid has a history doing this, and Kyle Shanahan has a history of elevating multiple quarterbacks. And now Sean Payton's had this ability to elevate and develop a different quarterback besides Drew Brees. And I think it's big for him as well, showing how good of a coach he's been.
Yeah. His record absent Brees is now looking pretty spectacular.
It is. All right, we're on to pick 13. It's Brock Bowers, the tight end out of Georgia, going to the Las Vegas Raiders. At the time, I thought this felt like the Raiders really missed out. They were in desperate need of a quarterback. 6 quarterbacks go ahead of them. That had never happened in NFL history. The consolation prize is great, but I'll be honest, it didn't feel great to me, from a Raiders perspective, saying, oh, everyone else is getting their future quarterback or at least taking a shot, and we have a tight end. Now, the tight end is awesome, and he's an outstanding receiver, and we all loved Brock Bowers. But if you're the Raiders with a massive quarterback need, it was like, all right, Bowers is going to be a nice weapon for our next quarterback. We'll get one next year. And it turns out they waited 2 years until they finally got their real quarterback in Fernando Mendoza. And now Bowers is going to feel good as a year 3 player and a weapon for Mendoza heading into the season.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they had the need of quarterback, but it never felt like they were going to get their shot at one. Like all the way along, the top tier quarterbacks were all going to be gone, in the first 5 picks. And then it was like, what do you think about the next 3 guys? McCarthy, Bo Nix, Michael Penix. And it didn't, because everyone thought that Bo Nix and Michael Penix were sort of fringe first round players. It was like a referendum on McCarthy. How high does he go? Do the Raiders like him? I'd say it just never felt like they were fitting a quarterback in this first round. But a guy like Brock Bowers, I think, okay, he's a tight end nominally, and that's not a position of value. But he was being talked about as a prospect as different, right? Not a normal tight end, number one, but also like an absolute difference maker, a genuine, number 1 threat in that Georgia offense. And what he did as a rookie was pretty spectacular, even without elite quarterback play throwing him the ball.
Yeah, I think he's as good as it gets. It's been a good run of first-round tight ends, I think, between him, Colston Loveland, and Tyler Warren. As much as I've soured on it, Bowers, though, he doesn't have the inline blocking skills, never really did from a Georgia perspective, but he brings enough in the pass game that I don't think it matters. And, there'll be some pressure on him because Mendoza, like the receiving core is not great for the Raiders. You've got, Tucker coming off of a career year, and you're hoping that Jack Besh develops as a year 2 player, and it just doesn't look great on paper, but Bowers is going to be the number 1 guy. He also has a single vote for offensive rookie of the year.
Only 2 players from this draft got offensive rookie of the year votes, and he's one of them.
He's one of them. Yeah, he was the one who kept Jayden Daniels from being the unanimous offensive rookie of the year. Thanks to I don't know. You're like one of the most popular AP. You got surpassed by Diana, but you were the microscope's all on you and Diana when it comes to AP.
Certainly not the most notorious anymore.
All right, Brock Bowers. more offensive players off the board. This was wild. We were sitting there on draft night being like, man, when is defense going to come off the board?
Yeah.
But we knew this coming in. Remember, coming in, we thought maybe 10. We thought pick 8, the Falcons would go defense, but as soon as they took a quarterback, it's like, we might not see a defensive player for a while. And we have to wait one more pick. Pick 14, the New Orleans Saints take Taliese Fuaga, the offensive tackle out of Oregon State. Similar to what I said about J.C. Latham, we're talking about a college right tackle. The plan was for him to start at left tackle. He did that as a rookie. Thought he looked fine as a rookie, held his own. I thought he looked fine in year 2. They moved him last year back to right tackle because they drafted Kelvin Banks. Banks started at left tackle. I think the Saints are sitting pretty as far as the future at tackle goes. Similar types of issues. Big guy sometimes will struggle with speed and give it up in pass pro a little bit, but I think his development track is moving in the right direction here for Fuaga.
Yeah, I mean, he's been solid, not spectacular at really all facets of the game, to be honest. Maybe you would expect his run blocking to be a little bit better based off what he was in college, but I think that takes longer for NFL offensive tackles. Like, I think that's the thing that actually comes along the slowest, is their ability in the run game. Pass protection's been fine. It's been solid. It's not like a massive strength of his or anything, but I think he's perfectly serviceable as a pass blocker. If the run blocking takes a step forward in year 3, then I think he'll be like a good caliber starting tackle for them.
Yeah, and just to be clear too, like about switching sides, I've always been on the side that, like, look, players do this all the time, and it matters more at offensive tackle than it does on the defensive side because you're literally just doing the same thing over and over and over again. Defensive players will switch sides and they have different moves and everything. Like, you're just trying to master the same pass set every single time. The footwork, the vision, just to be able to see stunts and twists. It is different when you keep switching year after year. It can be a detriment. And again, he's held his own. And I think he'll be more comfortable on the right side. And I have to always repeat, because there's always new listeners, there's not a difference in difficulty between left and right tackle. So I don't think they've put him in an easier spot when they moved him to right tackle, but they're putting him into what was more of a familiar spot for him in college. And I think that'll help him going forward. So Fuanga's been a solid pick at pick 14. I think Latham has a chance to be a solid pick. I think Fuanga's been a little bit better, though, for the Saints. Finally have a defensive player off the board. Pick 15. The Indianapolis Colts take Laiatu Latu, the edge rusher out of UCLA. And the only surprise here, we both loved Latu coming out. The only surprise here was that Dallas Turner wasn't the top defensive player off the board. I believe he was the betting favorite. And again, because the Falcons had been linked to him so much at pick 8, everybody expected Dallas Turner from Alabama to be the number 1 edge rusher. It was Latu, and we were both like, hey, that made sense to us. Technically sound, very good player. And I think he's been an above average, good, solid player for the Colts here through 2 years.
Yeah, so we talked about the tackle class before. The edge rusher class was basically that big 3. It was Laiatu Latu, it was Jared Verse, and it was Dallas Turner. Dallas Turner had been the number 1 guy from most people's perspective for most of the process. We thought Latu was the best edge rusher of the 3. And it's like draft night, we felt vindicated. It's like, great. The Colts just saw what we saw, the best edge rusher in this draft. Turns out that so far that's been Jared Verse, not Laiatu Latu. So the victory lap didn't last that long. But last year in particular, like Latu's, so he was this incredibly developed skill set pass rusher as opposed to the athlete still, learning his way. He was already incredibly developed and incredibly well-versed. And you assume those guys hit the ground running at the NFL level because they're already just such technicians. And his year 1 was really nondescript, really disappointing and concerning. Year 2, so much better, like made so many more plays. And now, looks like he's going to be a really good player going forward. But certainly after a year, you're like, man, Jared Verse is easily the best of these guys. Maybe Latu will make it more of a competition going forward. But yeah, year 1 was a struggle. Year 2, he looked very good.
Yeah, and last year he made a ton of plays in coverage, Latu Island, multiple interceptions. I think he's been solid. I mean, I use that word a lot, but 70th percentile pass rusher, 86th percentile pass rush win rate. I mean, it's been good over the last 2 years overall. What I criticized him for last year when we did the show was just pure, like, dominant wins and finishes and everything. Just did not have enough of those. We saw more of that last season. I think there's still more to come. I think he's been a good pick, but maybe slightly underwhelming compared to what I would want in the body of work of 2 years to be. But I thought, as you mentioned, last year was definitely a step in the right direction for Latu. I think he's a very good player, very good, dependable player. Don't forget all of the injury concerns with him coming out, had quit football, transferred. That was a question, but he's been on the field and a good, solid player for the Colts through 2 seasons. We will go faster, I promise. Bryon Murphy next. Defensive tackle out of Texas. Going to the Seattle Seahawks, and Murphy, there were rumors about him maybe going in the top 10 as we got closer to the draft, but no defensive players went in the top 10. But the second defensive player off the board is Murphy. Played a lot of nose tackle at Texas, very good run defender, can rush the passer, very athletic, and I think a huge part of Seattle's defense with the way they like to attack opposing offenses with their light boxes and a lot of pressure on him, and a big part of their Super Bowl run.
Yeah, and I think he'll continue to be a really, really good player for them going forward because of the system they've got, because of the coach, Mike McDonald there. He was an unusual prospect because he's like a 3-technique defensive body. He's like 305 pounds, but he was the guy that was playing nose tackle, which was made even more weird by the fact that Texas, that defense, had T'Vondre Sweat, the 360-pound defensive tackle, not playing nose tackle a lot of the times when Bryon Murphy was playing nose tackle. Like they were backwards. Like you'd expect the reverse to be true. But they did that because Bryon Murphy's really, really good defending the run. Like it made sense. And you're sort of seeing that with the way he's deployed in Seattle as well. Like he can do a bit of everything. He's just disruptive in both areas of the game. And because of that, the way that defense works, like he's going to be put in a position to succeed.
Yeah, I really liked Murphy coming out. I think he's back and forth. Like he'll anchor, he'll do a lot of that, like drop a knee to anchor. And he had some sick plays at Texas that I think have carried over to the NFL, where he'd, get low, leverage, handle the double team, get in on the play, or at least hold the point. He's back and forth on being able to do that. Sometimes he'll get washed, but he's been really disruptive as a pass rusher. I think you can move him around the defensive front as well, because like you said, he was used to mixing it up against centers and double teams and everything, but Seattle's moved him around a little bit, and I think he's got a chance to just continue to improve. I thought he took a big step last year and has even more in the tank. He was a young player coming out as well, still really young, and he has a chance to take another step and be a star, more of a star going forward. If you ask Seahawks fans, like he's already there. I think there's a fair case for him. And I think in the coming years, the depth of Seattle's defensive line stands out more than the star power. But Leonard Williams has played like a star. DeMarcus Lawrence has at various points. But there's a chance Murphy this year and beyond looks like the best player on that defensive line going forward. So I think the Seahawks are thrilled with their pick at 16, Bryon Murphy. Then we get some more shenanigans in the draft. The Minnesota Vikings trade up from 23 to 17, and they're the team that takes Dallas Turner. So Minnesota, another interesting move here, because there were rumors about them trading up. They had extra draft capital to go get J.J. McCarthy or to get a quarterback. Remember, I told you they might try to trade up for Drake Maye. So they don't trade up for a quarterback, and it almost felt like, hey, we got these extra draft picks we were anticipating losing. Why don't we go get the guy that was the perceived top defensive player in the draft? I don't think he was, but the perceived. Dallas Turner, and they get him at 17. He stepped into an edge rush rotation that had Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel. They just traded Grenard and Dallas Turner, ready to take over as a starter here in year 3. And if you looked at his development profile, that seemed like the right path for him going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of comes down to what you thought about Dallas Turner at the time, because if you thought he was the top edge rusher in this draft, and they should have gone number 8 to Atlanta if they hadn't gone crazy and drafted a quarterback, like if that's kind of where you thought of Turner, and then you thought he was the best of the 3, meanwhile Latu, Verse, these are the guys that are going. Verse was still on the board, but Turner still being there. Okay, you can say, well, jumping up 6 spots or whatever that is to get him on top of the quarterback that sort of fell into your lap. You'd be like, well, that's fantastic. And then he gets to go into this Flores defense. Turner in particular, of those 3, is the one who had the most skills, you would say, in terms of being able to drop into coverage, right? Which is a Flores thing. if you're picking one of those three, you'd want him from a schematic fit versatility standpoint. So that part made some sense. And then year one, actually, played a chunk, 300 snaps or whatever it was. Like, it's not like he didn't see the field, but didn't make any kind of impact whatsoever, effectively. Year two, I think we started to see more from him, made a much bigger impact. Still maybe not what he was expected to, but now year three, obviously they've kind of cleared the pathway for him to be the every down starter, to get, a full slate of reps and see if he can take another step forward and basically replace what they've lost in Grenard.
Yeah, coming out, I thought Turner had a decent profile, not as high end. I mean, I liked Latu and Verse better. I thought there were some other more productive edge rushers who had come out in recent years, but Turner wasn't as unproductive as some of the other players who had gone in the first round. I thought he was in the middle of the pack, size, length, had the skills to develop, and it felt like the right development path for him to, take over in, middle of year two and into year three. So I think it's the right path for him. A lot of his big plays, I thought he was unblocked last year, forced some fumbles though, and we'll see if he could do it in a full season, but I think this is the right time for him to maybe take off and take another step. Rookie mistake by us, Sam. Are we on the wrong sides for this entire show? Have we been on the wrong side?
Yes, we are.
Wow. No one's mentioned it yet. I haven't seen anybody mention it. Barry, the chat's usually on top of things. I'm usually on the other side here. So I don't know if we could, is it too late to flip?
Oh no, we could flip and just ruin everybody.
Just really mess with people here. Uh-oh.
Everything.
Oh, you can see my whole background.
No, I think, here we go. I got it.
Flip. There we go. We're on the right side now. Thank you guys for dealing with us here. Where are we at? That was pick 17. By the way, ended up being a really good, this is the last Trent Baalke draft, right? Second, whatever it was. Yeah, last Trent Baalke draft. And good move. Traded down from 17. What? I sound surprised. All right, pick 8. Thank you, Trent. Amarius Mims is the pick at 18 for the Cincinnati Bengals. They get their right tackle of the future. They had already brought in Orlando Brown over the last couple of years, and then they needed a long-term right tackle play, and they get that with Amarius Mims. There were a lot of people that put Amarius Mims and Tyler Guyton in the same bucket going into the draft as far as developmental tackles. I always thought Mims was a better prospect, but he played under 1,000 snaps, which is why he got this developmental tag. Not a lot of snaps in college, but the size, movement skills, power, and I think we've seen the right progression from him, like I was talking about with Dallas Turner, like the right progression where had some issues in year one and in year two. It's not perfect, but he's got the right trajectory. Year two, I thought he was solid.
Yeah, massive human being. Had actually, like, he played well at Georgia when he played. It's just that he hadn't played that much, right? And he had some injury history, so it was a sort of sample size and potential durability question for him, but huge human being, athletically, had everything you want and actually had some pretty good tape. It's just the question was, will that translate? Kind of like JJ McCarthy, but on the offensive line. Like, will that scale if he plays 1,000 snaps every season, and then can he play 1,000 snaps every season and just stay upright? But yeah, so far it's working out pretty well for them. He looks like he's definitely moving in the right direction, on the right trajectory to be a good player going forward. Yeah,
he'll still in pass protection. I think he could be staying square a little bit and letting guys get around him and get into his pads a little bit more than you'd like to see. But that's the type of stuff that continues to get better. And when I look at offensive tackles in year 1 and 2, I just want to make sure that the baseline's not awful. And I think it's been average to slightly above average here for Mims so far. So that's a good place to be. The Bengals offensive line as a whole, I think, is an interesting situation because all the starters are coming back, but you wouldn't go and say, okay, man for man, they're great. But I think the continuity is important. I think the fact that Dylan Fairchild's going to be in year 2 and Mims is heading into year 3. Like, those are the types of players that continue to take a step forward to go with some of the dependable veterans. So I think the Bengals have a chance to be, I don't know, maybe have their best offensive line in a few years here.
He's also trending up within seasons, not just season to season. Like, year 1 was a bit of a struggle. Year 2 was better. But even within year 2, the second half of the season was way better than the first half of the season. So, like, from the direction of travel for him looks very good.
Yeah, we always say progression isn't linear, but sometimes it is. And for offensive linemen, it might make sense for it to be. And I think he's in, like I said, the right trajectory here for Amarius Mims at 18. Pick 19, the Los Angeles Rams take Jared Verse, the edge rusher out of Florida State. So the Rams, they made some moves, man. There were rumors that they were trying to trade up into the top 10, reportedly for Brock Bowers. They were unable to do that. I love every theoretical butterfly effect Rams move. So they go get Jared Verse, who has 2 outstanding seasons and has since been traded with other picks for Myles Garrett. So what a turn of events here for the Los Angeles Rams to get 2 elite seasons out of Jared Verse, hammer in the run game, hammer as a pass rusher, one of the best bull rushes in the NFL, if not the best, dominant player for 2 years. I'd say a star, not a superstar. Myles is a superstar. But now they've traded him with multiple picks to go get Myles Garrett. And it all started here on draft night in 2024.
Did. Third edge rusher off the board, ends up being the best in year 1, wins defensive rookie of the year, and just a dominant player from day one, and just brought this level of power as a rusher that you hadn't seen before for a long time. Like, he might still be the best power rusher in the NFL. Like, when he hits offensive tackles, it's just different. I mean, he played that way in college. He sort of sought contact in a way edge rushers typically don't. And it really translated to the NFL level. He's just able to run through people in a way they're not expecting. And yeah, maybe, the Myles Garrett thing sort of highlights the question of, like, can he ever get anywhere near, I mean, not just Myles Garrett, that's kind of unfair, but can he ever be a truly elite all around, like the best edge rusher in the NFL? Or does he top out at Pro Bowl, very good best power rusher in the NFL, but maybe is going to leave a little bit on the table in terms of dynamism, speed, that kind of stuff. But fantastic player, fantastic pick at this spot.
And remember how important he was. The Rams were coming off of 2023 where they had to reset a lot of their talents. Stafford played pretty well. They snuck into the playoffs, right, that season? Is that right? 23? Those were, they found Puka Nacua and Kobe Turner, but they were resetting this roster in the post-Aaron Donald era. And then it's like, all right, we're going to do that in one offseason with Jared Verse in round 1, trade up for his teammate at Florida State, Braden Fisk, in round 2, drafted 2 more defensive linemen later, and all the Rams, and then, of course, what they ended up getting for him, trading him in the middle of his rookie contract, which never happens. For Myles Garrett. Go check out our Myles Garrett Jared Verse trade analysis on the channel here. Pick 20, the Pittsburgh Steelers go Troy Fautanu, the offensive tackle / guard out of Washington. Bit of a late riser in this process, Sam. He had tackle length, but teams liked him as guard or tackle. And he's been pretty solid when he's been out there. Battled injuries, though, through 2 years here for the Steelers.
Yeah, we keep talking about all these. Every year, it seems more and more there are tackles that are being talked about as guards and kicked in immediately. Fautanu was one where I think everyone thought he would kick into guard just from watching the tape. And then when he measured and did all the testing, it's like, no, he's actually prototypical tackle size and like athleticism. Like, there's no reason he shouldn't be playing tackle. He just looks like a guard weirdly in terms of like body type, way he plays. It was kind of a bizarre mix of that. And then the Steelers ended up taking him, playing him at right tackle the whole way. And he's been solid. He's certainly been good at pass protection there. Again, the run blocking is lagged behind, but doesn't mean it won't come to meet the pass blocking.
And that showed up a lot with the Steelers last year. I think a lot of their line was, they weren't great in, have to run type of situations. They may have been protected a little bit by Aaron Rodgers in the quick release. Remember, Fautanu was limited to just 55 snaps as a rookie, missed most of the season, stepped in, played good, solid right tackle last year. There was talk about him maybe moving to the left side because Broderick Jones is, battling for his job there. But I think, Fautanu locking down the right tackle, he looked fine there last year. So I think they're in a good spot. And for him, Fuaga, even Latham or whatever, I mean, if you just get a good starting offensive lineman, it might not feel sexy at the time, but when you have this guy, locked up for a long time there, it does feels better as you go. I think the Steelers are in that spot here with Fautanu. Plus, he does have that versatility if you have to move him around. Played left tackle in college. All right. Where are we at here? Pick 21. The Miami Dolphins take Chop Robinson out of Penn State, the edge rusher. This was a bit of a surprise, Sam, because I think a lot of mocks had him going in the second round, but he looked great as a rookie. Rushed the passer, created havoc. He's a little undersized, was never a great run defender, but he was a very good pass rusher as a rookie, and then not so good in year 2 among the many Dolphins who disappointed on that side of the ball, for me at least, in their second year, or at least last year.
Yeah, it was definitely a surprise pick. I think a lot of people saw it as a reach because, as you said, seen as a sort of second rounder, fringe first round player. I always thought he belonged closer to that top 3 in the conversation than he seemed to be, because the pass rushing was so good in college. He was such a dynamic pass rusher, so explosive. The athleticism, the burst, all those things are there for him to be a top tier pass rusher. And even if he's not going to be a good run defender, like that's valuable. It's worth a first round draft pick type of investment. And year 1, that looked exactly like the player he was going to be. Like PFF grades were great. He had 50 something pressures. He looked like he was going to be that guy. Admittedly, run defense wasn't good, but he looked like a dynamic pass rusher. And then, like everybody on that Miami defensive line last year, he went missing. He didn't make any plays. He just took a huge step backwards. And now it's like, well, does he bounce back in a new defense with a new environment? Like, you can't just, he showed he can do it as a rookie. It just completely disappeared last season.
He reminded me of the Carl Lawson type, not completely in play style necessarily, but in when you look at pass rush production versus run game production, like it was pass rush heavy. But Robinson's Chop has been better against the run than I had anticipated as far as how he uses his hands and leverage and pad level. Just what doesn't always finish plays. He leaves some plays on the table. Never really had a high run stop percentage or playmaker type of rate all the way back to college. But it was the pass rush inconsistency last year that really shocked me. The fact that he could not get after the quarterback the same way he did as a rookie. So I think he's got it in him. It's just a matter of getting back to where he was as a rookie. He should be a dynamic pass rusher, good spin move and quickness and everything. Like, he's got all the tools to be a very good player. And again, impressed me more in the run game than I had anticipated. Let me down more in the pass game than I had anticipated last year, at least. So I'm expecting a bounce back year 3 for Chop Robinson. Pick 22, Quinyon Mitchell. The Eagles take the cornerback out of Toledo, and this looks like a home run pick again for Howie. Quinyon Mitchell, a lockdown corner pretty much from day 1 for the Eagles. And remember, this was their Super Bowl season. They go win the Super Bowl in Quinyon's rookie season. They get him and Cooper DeJean with their second round pick. The big story coming in, the Eagles, Howie and the Eagles never take first round corners all the way back to 01, 02, the Lito Shepherd year where they doubled up at corner. Like, they had never taken a corner, and then they finally do. And they get one of the best corners in the NFL right away here in Quinyon Mitchell.
Yeah, it was an interesting corner group where Mitchell was the first guy off the board. A couple of picks later, Terrion Arnold goes off the board. We'll get to that. A lot of people had him as cornerback 1 overall. Nate Wiggins was the next guy. And then you had this run in the second round where it's Cooper DeJean, who the Eagles get as well. Kool-Aid McKinstry, Kamari Lassiter, Max Melton. So I think a lot of people did have Quinyon Mitchell as cornerback 1, but it certainly wasn't unanimous. So they picked the right guy as the top corner off the board. And then he had this, interesting story as a prospect where he stayed at Toledo the whole way, didn't transfer up anywhere, goes to the Senior Bowl, basically to prove that he could play press man coverage, because Toledo plays like off the whole way. And that's all anyone had seen him do. Had like a day or two of just locking people down and press man coverage. And then it's like, right, I'm out. I've shown that. Like, bounces from the Senior Bowl, right? Just I've shown it.
He stayed. He just didn't play. He didn't suit out. He
right,
did stay.
But bounced from like
active,
participation. It was just like, all right, I've done what I came here to do, and sat down. And then comes in the NFL and just looks like a lockdown elite level corner.
Yeah, he's been great, and a great pick. I thought because Sauce Gardner stayed at Cincinnati, and they were a group of 5 at the time. And because Quinyon stayed at Toledo, those were like rare in the transfer era. And we've seen some now call them smaller schools. Cincinnati's in the Big 12, but call them smaller school corners who have come good after not transferring and translated pretty well to the NFL. So Quinyon's been outstanding and will continue to be one of the better corners in the NFL going forward by my projections. So the Jags are up at pick 23. They take Bryon Thomas Jr. out of LSU. So they traded down, get BTJ, the fourth receiver off the board here. And it looked like a absolute steal after year one. Not so good in year two, but in year one, man, I know we were both lower on Bryon Thomas Jr. than everyone else. And then you became higher on him than anyone else, calling him the best receiver out of any of these first rounders after his rookie season.
Yeah, and now I have no idea what to do with him. Really didn't like him as a prospect. Like I talked about him being the next Marquez Valdez-Scantling, a vertical threat, linear, straight line type of receiver. And then year one, he looked absolutely spectacular. He looked like the most athletic of all of them. He looked like the most dynamic of them. He's got a level of size that's above what Malik Nabers brings to the table. And then he looked like once it clicked with him and Trevor Lawrence, he could just be everything, do it all, number one type wide receiver. It looked amazing. And I think that was the plan going into year two. And then it just didn't work. He didn't look the same. The connection with Lawrence still wasn't great. And he really didn't have a good year. And basically, Jacksonville's passing attack, it took off when they kind of scaled back what they were asking of Bryon Thomas Jr. Now they're kind of making noises again that we've sort of figured it out. He's going to have a huge year. It's going to be great. And maybe that's true. Or maybe he just is one of these receivers that has a weird career where he is spectacular almost right out of the gate and then never backs that up. I honestly don't know. The skills are all there. The size, the speed, the dynamism. He could be amazing, but we've already seen that that's not a guarantee. And maybe he does get scaled back to being more of just a sort of vertical threat.
Yeah, I mean, coming out, I think we saw him. It's not an apt, perfect comparison, but a Gabe Davis type where he'll just be the big vertical threat for your team. He was much more than that as a rookie.
Yeah,
but it did feel like, okay, what's that balance? We don't need to force feed 15 targets to him. I mean, there's a chance the Jags have the best receiving core in the NFL if he is 80% of what he was as a rookie, with Jacoby Myers, with Parker Washington, with Travis Hunter adding whatever he adds. There's a chance the Jags have the very best receiving core in the NFL. So Bryon Thomas Jr. as a rookie, the numbers were great, could have been even better. The number of times that he was behind the defense, Trevor Lawrence was missing him, Mac Jones was missing him when he came into play. The numbers could have been even more spectacular for Bryon Thomas Jr. So I think it's trying to figure out that balance for him. And he made some big plays last year. It wasn't like he completely disappeared. He did make some big plays last year, but they showed up in some, 3-catch, 90-yard type of games rather than early in the season. It felt like they were feeding him the ball as a number one wide receiver, and it just wasn't all coming together. So I think he might be at his best. Be the vertical threat, pick your spots. There'll be some games where he goes off, but he has to be a downfield threat that you keep an eye on because you don't have the size and speed, 4.3 speed that he has around the league very often. And he could be a perfect complement on paper to Jacoby Myers, Parker Washington, and Travis Hunter. So I think I've soured on the Jags a little bit because the offseason didn't feel great, but this nucleus at receiver has a chance to absolutely carry them, especially with what BTJ is capable of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a pick of 23. Thank you, Trent Baalke, for a parting gift. Pick 24, the Detroit Lions take Terrion Arnold, the cornerback out of Alabama. We'll get to the specifics on what's going on with him right now. But at the time, remember, Detroit, they were loaded. They were coming off of an NFC Championship loss. Whole roster's loaded, except at corner.
Yeah.
And we said, look, they're going to go into the draft with a massive need at corner. You don't always want to do that, but everything else is pretty locked in. They take Arnold. They take Ines Rakestraw. With the second rounder, it's like, all right, boom. And they added DJ Reed that offseason too. So they attacked a position of need with free agents and draft picks. It looked great. You and I both loved Arnold coming out as a man coverage corner. That's what they threw him into in Detroit. He got torched year one, like 8 penalties in 3 weeks. It got slightly better from a 2-year perspective. Maybe he was going to get better this year, but we got some off-field issues going on here.
Oh,
yes,
yeah,
I see the chat mention. I got my dad's Marine Corps mug here.
So we really liked him as a prospect. Again, a lot of people had him as cornerback 1 in the draft. It was a weird draft where Kool-Aid McKinstry was sort of seen as the main cornerback at Alabama for most of the way through, and then towards the end, it was like actually Arnold, his teammate, is a better corner. Ends up going higher. His fluidity,
By the way,
his ability to match.
Sorry to interrupt really quick. They had Trey Amos on the team that year too,
right?
Who transferred in, was supposed to see the field, and Arnold beat him out and stole all his reps. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, so I mean, he effectively jumps from like CB3 to cornerback 1 at Alabama, and theoretically in the kind of draft was like catapulted himself to being a lot of people's top cornerback available. Just this incredible fluidity of movement, ability to match, look like a perfect man cover corner. Detroit, the perfect fit for that. They throw him in, and then basically immediately he starts getting flagged for penalties. I think he had 4 in the first 2 games, 8 in the first 4 games. He ended up with 10. He ended up with 10 overall in the season, but 8 of them came in the first 4 weeks of the season. And at that point, it's like, okay, the way you're playing the game has to change completely, immediately. So it's already an incredibly difficult transition, right? To go from college to the NFL and play in a man-heavy type of scheme. And now after a month of play, the league has basically told you, you can't play the way you're playing the game. You need to stop, right? So he has to not only make the transition, but now completely rewire the way he's trying to play the game. So it just gets blowtorched as a rookie. Year 2, I think, looked better. Was still a work in progress, but wasn't as grabby. Had kind of figured that part of it out, was generally in closer coverage and looked more at home. And you're like, well, big year now for him going into year 3, and you have all this stuff blow up with, alleged kidnappings and all sorts of craziness. And whatever about how that's going to play out, whether his lawyer will work magic or whatever, the fact that the Lions cut him basically the second he got out of the holding cell is probably pretty significant.
So he's no longer a Lion. He's been released. I may have picked him as my Lions breakout player this year earlier. We should probably go edit that episode. It's supposed to be evergreen content, right? It's good for the entire summer. Well, it's not anymore. So I'll have to find a different Lions breakout player for our Lions friends. But not a great, if he's guilty of all these things, pretty poor decision making for the former first round pick. So not great at all. No longer a Lion. Terrion Arnold, I believe his agent's saying he's been visiting teams that are interested in him. I think I'm assuming they're gonna let the legal process play out and go from there. Sorry, it was Carlton Davis that they added in 2024. My apologies. But Carlton Davis was a nice addition on paper, in addition to what they got from Arnold and Rakestraw as their 2 draft picks. So not a good projection for Arnold and the Lions going forward here. For the sake of this show. All right, pick 25. The Green Bay Packers take Jordan Morgan, offensive tackle out of Arizona. They love guard tackle hybrids. That's what they get. In Morgan, he's played more guard than tackle, but he's played everywhere. Left tackle, right tackle, both guard spots. He's slated to be the next left tackle here for the Packers. In a very Packers move to draft somebody, develop them, and then let them take over as the starter here in year 3. I've got some concerns about Morgan. I don't think he handles power that well. Lets players get into his pads, both at guard and tackle, but he's projected to be the starting left tackle here heading into his 3rd season.
Yeah, everything about this is very Packers. As I said, take a college tackle. They kicked him into guard. Year 1, he played both guard spots, but he was exclusively a guard. Year 2, he played everywhere. They moved him to right tackle. He was at guard. And now he's with the hole at left tackle. He's scheduled to step in and be their starting left tackle this season. So really played all over the place for the Packers. Again, the kind of thing they do in addition to that tackle into guard thing. And that type of upheaval, I think, is pretty hard to play at a really high level consistently. So he has naturally been inconsistent, but I don't think that's necessarily his fault. I'm curious to see how he's going to play now as in every down, you're the left tackle. Let's see how you go for 17 games.
Yeah, played a full season last year again at all those various positions. I had him as a below average player in my numbers. We'll see what happens in a full season at tackle if maybe just being in one spot does help him just a little bit. So that's Morgan for the Packers at pick 25. At pick 26, the Tampa Bay Bucks take Graham Barton out of Duke. He was a tackle, left tackle at Duke. They moved him to center, the Bucks. I think he had some ups and downs as a center as a rookie, and then last year had to go back to left tackle to start the season because of Tristan Wirf's injury at the start of the year. Barton struggled a little bit at left tackle, but I think at center he's been okay. He's been fine, and a run game weapon for the Bucks.
I think he's been better than that. I actually really liked him at center. I thought he played really well there as a rookie. Plus, you're playing at center, you get the added thing of that's it's a lot on your plate from a mental transition standpoint. It's not the easiest position to come in and play right away, and so you've got that. But I thought he looked really good as a pass blocker there. The movement skills he has, from that tackle college career, I thought translated really well. Again, run blocking further behind, but I think that's just a standard thing for offensive linemen generally coming into the league. And then year two just kind of got, thrown sideways based off the injuries to that offensive line and him having to go at tackle. I mean, he's not capable of playing tackle basically at the NFL level. Like he's overwhelmed at that. And I think that probably set him back a bit.
It's not a perfect apples to apples comparison, but remember coming out, there was talk that he could be a 5-position player. Maybe he could hold his own at tackle, both guard spots at center. And now it's like, maybe, he hadn't been training at tackle until training camp. So maybe it's not perfect, right? He also played the Texans, the very best edge rush duo in the NFL. And so that's what makes it difficult. Like if you're going to go on and look at his pressure numbers and this and that, it's going to be skewed heavily by 3 games at left tackle where they give up far more pressures than centers do. So that's going to hurt just a little bit. But I think he's continued to improve, and I think we probably see the best play from Graham Barton here in year 3 with a full year at center with the new offensive coordinator, Zach Robinson, with the Bucs here. He moves really well too. And I think the zone heavy scheme that you'll anticipate, I think there's a chance. I called him a run game weapon because when he wins in the run game, you see him at the second level, you see him pulling on screens. He's out there leading a lot of big plays. He'll lose a little bit in the run game, but when he wins, it's usually tied to big plays for the Bucs in the run game and screen game. That's pick 26. Pick 27, Arizona Cardinals take Darius Robinson, the edge rusher out of Missouri, or defensive tackle, depending on what you want to call him. This was Arizona's pick from the Houston Texans that we anticipated going into the year. Could have been top 10, but it wasn't because the Texans were good in 2023. And so the topper off the Will Anderson trade goes Darius Robinson from Missouri. He has not been great through 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, year 1 was basically ruined by injury. Barely saw the field, didn't get on the field until, pretty late in the season. So you basically write off your rookie season. Year 2, he ends up playing 500 snaps or whatever, but does not play well in 500 snaps. So through 2 years, it's been a bit of a disaster of a pick for them. There are some, I mean, maybe it's unfair given, as we just said, right off year 1 from injury, year 2, it's your first year doing it. Sometimes where you kind of get a player come to mind, and you're like, you should probably, if you just followed that through to its natural conclusion, it would tell you everything you need to know about the player. Like he reminded me of Tyson Jackson, who remember went at like 3 overall for the Chiefs and was basically not good. It's like they just drafted Tyson Jackson again. Like this is kind of what it would look like in today's NFL.
Tyson Jackson was like a quintessential 5-tech in the early part of the century. And you said that all the way through, that Darius Robinson reminded you of an old school 3-4 5-tech, which the position still exists. But back then you were playing base defense 50, 60, 70% of the time. The run game, those guys play the run really well. Then they kick inside, rush the passer. And the best players were, the Ty Warrens of the world were really, really valuable. The Steelers 5-techs were really valuable. But then Tyson Jackson was out there. He would have like 5 pressures a year. And it's like, I don't know if his run defense is worth, never getting after the quarterback.
There's also, there's those players that play old school 5-tech that could also immediately become a 3-tech and still be really, there's players that can do a lot of different things, of which 5-tech is one of them. And then there's to players that could play 5 tech and kind of that's all they could do, right? And if you asked them to do anything else, it disappeared. And that, to an extent, worked back in the early 2000s when teams would play that most of the time. And, then when they went to sub packages, those guys would just be less efficient. There's just no place for that guy in today's NFL. Like that, the guy that can only do that doesn't really have a role anymore. Like maybe he does, but it's like a very specific, specific package, sub rotation type of thing. You can't play that guy 500 snaps and have him make any kind of impact. And so far, that's what Darius Robinson has been.
The comparison I used for Robinson was Jermaine Johnson, who came out a couple years before, first rounder for the Jets. Both guys had average college production, but dominated the Senior Bowl. And Jermaine Johnson, it looked like he was going to come good and build off that Senior Bowl in the NFL. He's been a little up and down, had some injuries. Robinson dominated the Senior Bowl from both spots, inside and outside. He's got that length on the outside. He was beaten up on tackles at the Senior Bowl. It just hasn't translated yet. We'll see what happens in year 3. New scheme, new system, but maybe when he's got enough bodies around him that are capable, he could do some damage on the interior, but just hasn't been there yet.
I actually liked him a little bit better in terms of what he could do on the edge. But the problem is, at his size, I just don't think he's going to get given that opportunity. It's a bit like Carl Brooks coming out a couple of years ago. He was like a 300-pound edge rusher, and he was like crazy effective at it. You're like, at that size and without an athletic profile in Brooks' case, you're just not going to play on the edge in the NFL. We're going to move you inside and see if you can do it there. And he's been okay up and down. Robinson's size, they're just not going to play him on the edge, but I think that might actually be where he's best at.
All right, the next pick, Sam, there were so many massive storylines in this draft. This was the other big one. The Buffalo Bills are on the clock. They trade down. The Kansas City Chiefs trade up, and they take Xavier Worthy, the wide receiver out of Texas, who had set the record for 40 time with 4.21 40 at the combine. How did the Bills let the Chiefs get the speed of Xavier Worthy? Chiefs coming off a Super Bowl win, and they trade up and get their speedy receiver for Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. Through 2 years for Worthy, I want to hear your take on it, but I don't think they've put him into the role because they were coming off a year. This was the first year where the Chiefs offense wasn't dynamic under Patrick Mahomes. They still won the Super Bowl, but it wasn't this like otherworldly offense. And Worthy was the guy that was supposed to get them back on track, right? We don't have Tyreek Hill anymore. Now you have Xavier Worthy. How do you let them get this 4.21 speed guy? They're going to stretch down the field. Mahomes' deep ball numbers were awful in 2023. Yeah. Worthy was going to fix everything, but it hasn't fixed everything yet because either he hasn't played the same role, there's been other injuries, he got hurt at the beginning of last year, wasn't really the same player. So now we're still sitting here in year 3 saying, what's the best way to use Xavier Worthy in all this speed? Or is he just a speed guy? Like, he hasn't been awful, but he hasn't really added that injection of downfield passing ability or, pass production that the Chiefs were hoping for.
Yeah, like it would be interesting to see. The problem is, we talked about this for a while, like this Chiefs offensive group of pass catchers has not been what they wanted it to be for like a couple of years now, in terms of they've had personnel. They've just rarely been on the field at the same time. And when they have, they run into each other and one of them gets injured, right? Like that, those have been the things that have been happening. So I think theoretically, Worthy would have been an interesting receiver to plug into this system that was relying on Rashee Rice as the main guy, that still had, Kelsey doing his bit. There were roles for other players, and then Worthy could come in and add that speed and some of the stuff that he could do as a kind of Z receiver and speed weapon. Only immediately you get, Rashee Rice is hurt. You get all kind, like it's chaos. Hollywood Brown doesn't make it for most of the season, and Worthy just gets put into a role that's much bigger than the one I think that he should have, or that they probably had tasked for him to begin with, and he struggles in that role. It's also the first pick of this second wave of wide receivers in this draft. You had the big 3 that we talked about. Brian Thomas Jr. was like the consensus wide receiver of 4 and sort of in his own group. And then this started a wide receiver run that it had in the next, whatever this is, 20 picks or so, Xavier Worthy, Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Legette, Keon Coleman, Ladd McConkey. That's 4 straight wide receivers, those consecutively. Jalen Polk from Washington, and even going down as far as Adonai Mitchell. who people were talking about as potentially, could sneak into the first round type of guy. Like those all go in the next sort of bottom of the first half of the second round guy. And they're all wildly different players. So it's like, okay, all these teams need wide receivers. What kind of wide receiver do you need? Because none of these guys are the same.
Right. And so Worthy was not the consensus wide receiver 5, to your point. Like he was going to go early second or whatever, but it was like, well, he's going to the Chiefs and they haven't had this type of speed since Tyreek, and just hasn't necessarily been there yet. But like to your point, when Rashee Rice got hurt, he became the gimmick guy. By the way, remember week 1 of 2024, they give him the end around and he takes it to the house immediately. Was it his first touch was an NFL touchdown? And it's like, how did the Bills let the Chiefs get this? It's just a fun storyline to capture, because Worthy was also the targeted receiver when the Bills got the game-clinching interception by Maxwell Hairston when they played last year. And, the Bills drafted Hairston and his 4.3 speed, I think, maybe to keep Xavier Worthy in check. So it's a fun storyline to capture. I think Worthy overall has been slightly underwhelming. It's not a bust at all. I think he's still a good player. And I think if Rashee Rice has a full season healthy and Travis Kelce this year, they could still put him in this role where he can just threaten the defense with his vertical speed, and I would maybe lean into that. But they spent all offseason saying that they were going to do that. Last year they were going to do that. We're getting the deep ball back, and it didn't happen last year because he got hurt right away, and actually Tyquan Thornton became a better deep threat. So we'll see if they can threaten down the field this year.
But I think the lesson is kind of how underwhelming that second wave of wide receivers just was in that draft. Like, interestingly, I just went back and looked at the consensus. Adonai Mitchell was the consensus wide receiver 5, but it's the same sort of, there was just this flood of wide receivers in some random order all bunched together. Mitchell was 30, Worthy was next at 33, McConkey 36, Keon Coleman 39, Xavier Legette 41. The point is, none of these guys have worked out. Like,
just McConkey.
The most successful of the next wave of wide receivers has been McConkey, and even he took a big step backwards in year 2. Ricky Pearsall, Roman Wilson, people loved. He's done nothing. Jalen Polk has been one of the worst picks anybody's made in the last. Like, it's all been bad. Like, this group of wide receivers, once you got outside of that top 4, it just didn't materialize.
We thought, and that's why we thought the Chargers taking Joe Alt and then picking from this group of receivers made sense. Now they got the best one in McConkey, and I think he's going to be by far the best one and be fine in year 3. But to your point, still wasn't as good in year 2. So the Worthy story, I think, is still to be written. I wouldn't write him off as a vertical threat. He doesn't win at the catch point that great, but again, the speed is the speed. And if you have to account for it defensively and the Chiefs can find a way to just run him on the over routes and get him going down the field, I think defenses will have to account for it. Let's go. So pick 29, Dallas Cowboys go Tyler Guyton. They had a massive need at left tackle. They picked a left tackle to plug and play in Tyler Guyton. I called this one of the biggest stories of the draft for me because he felt like the least plug and play first rounder out of anybody. And I think that showed up on the field. He was a different type of projection than Amarius Mims, because you mentioned with Mims coming out of Georgia, when he played, he didn't play often, but when he played, he was really good. When Guyton played at Oklahoma, he was okay. And you don't draft okay offensive tackles as plug and play players. So he lost a lot, pass pro, run game. But when he got it right, Tyler Guyton, it looked great. So he was a pure potential play if you could tighten up the technique and the consistency. It just hasn't been there through two years, and he's been benched multiple times and battling for his job here in year 3.
Yeah, I mean, he was the classic, all the tools are there, but the play isn't yet play, right?
Yeah.
The classic sort of gamble on tools, offensive lineman, and hope the project works out. And it hasn't yet. I mean, he's been the same guy at the NFL level as he has been at college level. He's been all over the place. He's been inconsistent. He's given up a lot of plays, and he's just not, there's no like linear development. We're not seeing a guy that's getting steadily better. And now they're going into year 3, still relying on him taking that step. Otherwise, they have a hole at that spot.
We talk a lot about offensive linemen losing quickly or instant losses or whatever. I think Guyton's are the worst of the ones we've talked about as far as the instant losses go. Nate Thomas is battling him for the left tackle spot heading into Guyton's year 3. Again, when he does it, when it's right, when he gets his hands right, he's incredibly strong. He moves well. It looks incredible. But when he misses, he misses in spectacular fashion, and that's what we've seen so far through 2 years with the Cowboys.
And we already mentioned it before. The next tackle off the board would have been Patrick Paul, who was also kind of an athletic, a bit of a project. I'm not saying you would have taken Patrick Paul in the first round, but if they'd taken something else in the first round, Dallas picked one spot after Patrick Paul went to Miami in the second round. You know, it would have been a player they could have potentially targeted and tried to get. They ended up selecting Marshawn Nealon, the late Marshawn Nealon, with that pick. But like Patrick Paul has developed in a way that Tyler Guyton hasn't yet.
Pick 30, the Baltimore Ravens take cornerback Nate Wiggins out of Clemson. Wiggins, they needed him to plug and play, and he's had a good first couple of years for the Ravens on the outside.
Yeah, I think he's been really good. His tape was arguably as good as anybody's in college in terms of coverage ability. His question mark was, you know, is he too lightweight? He was sort of 6 foot plus, but he was 180 pounds. And this is, you know, coming hot on the heels of Emmanuel Forbes not working out, you know, at an incredibly lightweight. Now he's got 20 pounds on Forbes, 15 pounds on Forbes. So it's not quite that extreme, but one of the most recent sort of question marks about, you know, thin, slight, lightweight corners was a disaster that probably factored into Wiggins' evaluation throughout the NFL. But it hasn't been a problem. He's looked good. He can definitely hang physically with big wide receivers. He's been, I think, a very good pick for them.
Yeah, I like Wiggins there. I think the speed plays, he's made some big plays in there, and I think good solid corner heading into year 3. You know, like wouldn't put him in Quinyon Mitchell's bucket or anything like that at this point, but good solid starting corner, and it was a need for the Ravens. I think he was battling Chidobe Awuzie at the time, and they needed to get younger at that position, and he'll be their top corner, I think, going forward as Marlon Humphrey ages and everything. Like he's their guy right now. And then 2 receivers off the board to finish out round 1. You get the San Francisco 49ers taking Ricky Pearsall out of Florida with pick 31. Remember, they were coming off their Super Bowl loss. They go back to the wide receiver well. I was surprised to see Pearsall go this high, but I really liked him as a player. He had one of the best catches I've ever seen at Florida. And that was whether he had Anthony Richardson at quarterback or anyone else. Pearsall always felt like one of the best players on the field when watching his 2 years at Florida, and the Niners loved him, took him at pick 31.
Yeah, and ended up with like a crazy athletic profile as well, right? Ran a 4.4 flat, but had a crazy fast 3-cone, like a 6.6 3-cone, you know, short shuttle was fast.
Really fast. I mean, he had his game speed numbers were through the roof. He played fast at Florida and backed it up with the combine. Yep.
Yeah, and explosive numbers, you know, vertical jump over 40 inches, that kind of thing. But obviously his career gets derailed by the fact that he gets shot before he sees the field, and that, you know, doesn't get onto the field as a rookie until like week 7 or whatever it was. And you know, that quote of Tomlin saying it's hard to jump on the moving train. So you have to kind of factor that in with his slow start as a rookie. Year 2, I think there would have been expectations for him to take a bigger step forward than he did. But he's still a work in progress for the 49ers.
It could be lazy to say, well, he landed in a good system because, yeah, like Shanahan's great and the offense is always good. But I thought Pearsall may have struggled on the outside with some physicality and everything. But Shanahan, McVay, like some of those offenses are going to free you up, let you use your speed and athleticism. We saw flashes of that late in his rookie season. And now we get the Ayuk is out, Debo's gone, Mike Evans is in, Juwan Jennings is out. Like there's an opportunity here for Pearsall with Evans being, you know, your go-to guy and George Kittle still being there. There's a chance for Pearsall to be that really nice complementary 2 where he can use that athleticism. So I think he's poised to maybe have his best season and put it all together here this year.
Mm-hmm.
And then we wrap it up with Xavier Legette from South Carolina. The Panthers traded back into the first round to take him. And the Bills, I think, traded out of this spot as well. Yeah. And the whole time, the storyline here was the Bills needed a receiver. They always needed this receiver. And there's a million receivers to choose from. They trade down for the Worthy pick. They trade down for the Legette pick. They finally take Keon Coleman a couple picks later. That's not worked out great for the Bills, but it's not like, to your point, all of the other receivers worked well either. But we knew that the Bills went in, no Stephon Diggs, needed a receiver replacement, finally took him with Keon Coleman, and gave up some of these other options, including Legette, who goes to the Panthers.
That's the thing. Like the only one they could have picked that would have obviously been better than what they did end up getting is Lad McConkey, and even he might not have solved their problems at receiver. So it was a weird spot in this draft. It turns out with hindsight, Legette is fascinating because he's a guy with like all these red flags, the sort of traditional receiver red flags of late career, breakout, all that kind of stuff. Also, I would love to know the study on the guys that are listed as like super freak size, and actually it turns out they're just moderately freaky sized, right? He was listed at like 6'3", 230, and when they actually threw a tape measure on him, it's like, he's only actually 6'1", 220. Still big. It's not like he's a small receiver, but it's not it's not as big as it was supposed to be. I wonder, I mean, I'm thinking in my head, just the two guys immediately that jump to mind with that, right, are Legette and the Treylon Burks, right, who are supposed to be like super freak size. And then once they actually measured, it's like, not so much. Neither of those guys have worked out. Therefore, anyone that measures dramatically smaller is a massive red flag in my eyes now. But, he's got speed, but it just doesn't separate, doesn't get open, doesn't have nuance to his route running. Just, doesn't have much of a role for them.
And Dave Canales, that was his first year, right? Had just taken over in Carolina. And because he had DK Metcalf in Seattle, and if you said, well, DK, he doesn't have the nuance. He's got the size, speed, freaky stuff, much bigger than Legette height-wise. But
yeah,
they let him just run post, slants, and goes, right, his first season, and it got by. Legette had a similar skill set where it's like, if you run it, was like Quinton Johnston too. They just give him a shallow, and he's got some good speed. You just don't want him running the full route tree and trusting him. And I think you've seen that through 2 years. Inconsistent hands, and just not a guy that, I don't know if he should have ended up in the first round because of the late breakout and inconsistencies in his receiver profile, but he had good size, good speed, good after the catch ability. He was solid in some areas, but not enough, I think, to be dependable, high target type of option.
But the DK thing is interesting because he is almost exactly what Legette was listed as, right? Like he is the size that Legette was supposed to be. And I actually wonder if that difference is significant. Like if you actually are 6'3", 230 and run the 4.3, like maybe you can be fairly one-dimensional and limited with what you're doing. But actually, if it turns out you're 2 inches shorter than that and 10 pounds lighter than that, maybe that's an important threshold in terms of being able to get away with being a one-dimensional type of receiver. An NFL corner can handle it at a smaller size, and he can't when it's DK Metcalf.
So I'll say this for year 3 for Legette, with Tetterow and McMillan being the one, and they just drafted Chris Brazzell, and they've just have more weapons where he can be, hey, just be what you are. You catch some screens, create after the catch, be the guy on the shallow that might be tough to tackle, and get down the field and win a few times with your speed and size. That could be enough.
Somebody mentioned previously, could we spend a couple minutes talking about guys that were supposed to go in the first round and slipped into the second? So a couple of names I would throw out. We've already kind of touched on Keon Coleman with this whole wide receiver mess. You could do the same with Lad McConkey. Johnny Newton, the Washington defensive tackle, was, I think, seen generally as a consensus first-round player and went in the second, has not lived up to those expectations so far. Cooper DeJean, we mentioned a bit with the cornerback stuff. A lot of people had him as a first-rounder, same with Kool-Aid McKinstry. And then I guess Jonathan Brooks would be the only other one that could have gone in the first that a lot of people expected to go, who goes in the second, the running back from Texas.
So, did you mention A.D. Mitchell?
Yeah, well, no, yeah, we mentioned him earlier as well. He was wide receiver 4 by the consensus.
5, right behind Brian Thomas Jr. So we thought A.D. Mitchell could slip into the back end into the first.
Yeah,
it could have been one of those receivers that came off the board. I would add Edgerrin. Did you mention Edgerrin Cooper?
No.
Okay, I would add Edgerrin Cooper, the Texas A&M linebacker, who I thought if a linebacker snuck into the first round, it would be him. He goes in the second. I thought that was a steal for the Packers. Brooks, he was coming off the injury. I think he would have been a first-round running back.
Right.
Maybe in the 20s at that point. All those guys make sense to me. I don't know if there's anyone else.
Two more, I guess I would throw in there. Jackson Powers-Johnson, people thought potentially, center, first round center, rare, but maybe he could be the guy. And then I think some people had Tyler Nubin there as well, the Minnesota safety who went to the Giants.
As you could see, there were no safeties, no linebackers in the first round. So Nubin being one of the top safeties, Cooper being one of the top linebackers. Sometimes they sneak in at the back end of first. And then I think at some point Mel Kiper put Roger Rosengarten, the tackle out of Washington, in the first round. He ends up going pick 62 to the Ravens, but in hindsight, it's like, yeah, he could have been a back end of the first round type of tackle. He's been a good, dependable right tackle for them through 2 years.
Charles in the chat asked, was this the Troy Franklin draft? It was indeed. Troy Franklin was apparently 42 or something on the consensus board. So it wasn't just us that loved him. Then he slipped to the 4th round.
Now, maybe that was our fault that we hyped him up.
It's just it's the inverse Tyree Wilson.
Free Troy. Somebody trade for him. He's so tough, man, because I still think there's a lot in there. And it did feel like every time he ran a good route this is why we're down on Bo Nix, because our guy Bo kept overthrowing our guy Troy Franklin when he was open down the field.
But also, we had him in that group with all those other wide receivers that were and so did the consensus, right? He was 40, 42, and
he's been better than
30
most of them.
And he's not been, whatever about what you think about Troy Franklin, he's been no worse than that other gaggle of wide receivers that were in that area. So we actually had him ranked in the right kind of area. It's just that the NFL apparently disagreed.
He's been better than Legette, better than Jalen Polk, of course. He's been better than Keon Coleman, I would say.
Right.
Yeah. Never wrong, just less wrong. We're wrong sometimes. Man, only 2 hours. This is a good show. So we had to put the time in. It's our one live show in like 3 weeks here in the middle. We had to put the time in, the 2024 class. I enjoy these. It's like a trip down memory lane and to look forward all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So listen, I encourage everybody, you have to check out the boo-boo breakdown, the injury breakdown on Monday, because you're hitting every single team here.
Yep.
With Vic. That's awesome. This is, if you play any level of fantasy, if you're any level of fandom, you got to listen up and know which injuries to keep an eye on. I didn't know what you said about Malik Nabers. I got to hear what he has to say about Malik Nabers, because I'm thinking he might just miss a few weeks, and it sounds like it might be worse. I can't wait to hear what he has to say, because I won't be there. It's you and Vic, but I want to hear what he has to say about Nabers and all these injuries across the board here. So
yeah,
that's Monday's show.
I hadn't heard of the type of thing that they'd done to his knee before, so it was a new one on me.
So that's Monday's show, and I believe next Thursday we're going to do this same thing, but on 2023 NFL draft prospects. So we'll go back and give the full 3-year sample, look back at the Bryce Young, CJ Stroud draft, what we thought at the time, and what's going to happen going forward with those players, where those are the types of players. Those are the players that are starting to get locked up long-term here, 2023 draft class. Good to go?
Mm-hmm.
All right, man. Everybody enjoy summer, and it's July, off-season content time. Mondays and Thursdays, 9 a.m. We'll get back to 3 days a week as we get closer to the season. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. We'll see you Monday. More Check the Mic.